Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 66 of Through the Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. My name is Trevor Damed, joined as... I said Trevor Damed. I got my own name wrong.
It happens. I mean, that's part of doing this thing. After about 66 shows, you stop caring what your name is.
Well, Trevor's name is Damon Good.
Yes,
that's an inside joke.
Yes, that's a deep cut from just our personal interactions. That's probably like 15 years old. That's, of course, the co-host of the show, Matt Feuerstein, and that other voice was the lovely guest of this episode, returning again, Dr.Keith Lipinski. Thank you, Keith, for coming back. This was a busy weekend for you. I mean, you just put on a show, your promotion, AAW, last night. I saw a lot of people talking about it. I feel like for some reason that last night seemed like the day on Twitter, at least from the people I follow, where it was like, can we just say independent wrestling is back? I know GCW ran a million shows during WrestleMania weekend, but it was the most I've seen other than that, people live tweeting an independent wrestling show since COVID started, I think.
Yeah, it was great. It was really fun to be back. I of course was not there. I was too important to go to that show, but I was watching it while unpacking boxes on Fight TV. And yeah, I definitely felt that a lot of people have enjoyed what we've done over the last few weeks, which is basically do like almost television studio like tapings and presenting them on Twitch live or recorded, and then putting them on our AAW on demand site and also on the High Spots video network. So something where I felt we had 5 solid weeks of television before this, and I think we really actually brought people's interest. And for the fact that we had people fighting in the crowd definitely proves that COVID is over, guys. So you can go ahead and tear off that mask, go ahead and burn all that hand sanitizer. Well, maybe don't do that. Please don't do that. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it was a great night. Definitely replays are available right now on Fight. And yeah, it's been a crazy, crazy week in my life. I moved 4 blocks south and 1 block west. I'm not going to tell everybody where I moved because I just worry about the groupies and like the Italian sex magazines, taking pictures. Because like for some reason or another, the house that we got, they didn't really believe in having like privacy in the bathrooms, and it was very odd. It was sort of like, like how am I supposed to enjoy my, usual ritual post show of taking a lovely Mr. Bubble bath and drinking like 4 or 5 Zimas all at the same time, like I was Kota Ibushi. But guys, as always, every time I come on the show, you guys know this, and I'm just going to repeat it again ad nauseum. This is one of my favorite podcasts, and I enjoy talking to you guys. And more importantly, I enjoy talking about pro wrestling that I actually enjoy and like, because I feel in 2020, there's so much incredible amount of negativity and awfulness that are out there right now. So the fact that I was able to go back in time to see a very good Ring of Honor show that I attended, although I didn't really, it was weird because when we talked about this as being the official Chicago correspondent of the podcast, I was just sitting there trying to remember anything from the show. And thankfully, while watching the show, it brought back some nice and warm, fuzzy memories.
Yeah, and I was going to try and my brain is off because I was trying to think of a transition to the usual plug for our podcast feed. I couldn't think of a transition, so this is a non-transition just to say there's a lot to talk about on the show. But before that, always like to plug our podcast feeds. We're on the Pro Wrestling Only Podcast Network, which is a great feed with a lot of different other podcasts on it. But if you want just us, we also have a feed basically on every podcast search thing that's just Through the Years, ThROH for through. And so you can get us just on our own or with a bunch of other great podcasts. Works either way. But actually,
and also, you found the podcast the first time. Just believe in yourself, and I promise you'll find the other episodes too.
But there's a lot to get to. So, and there's actually no news between the last show and this show because the last show was literally the day before this show. So we might as well get right to it. Nowhere to Run took place May 14th, 2005 at the Frontier Fieldhouse in Chicago Ridge, Illinois, in front of a reported crowd of 800 fans. We open backstage with Bryan Danielson, who says he woke up feeling the effects of the previous night's cage match with Homicide, but he is proud he won their 5-match series. He says tonight what he's really looking forward to, though, tonight is what he's really looking forward to. Everything has led up to his world title shot tonight. Alex Shelley then walks at this point to start a little storyline that will continue throughout the first half of the show. He says he needs a tag partner for tonight. He immediately sucks up to Bryan. He says they both think beards are cool. They both think airplane spins are cool. There's one point you can see if you watch while Shelley's going on where very clearly it looks like Bryan is trying his best not to laugh. He's barely holding on.
As Bryan Danielson does in promos.
Yeah, Bryan was very known at this point. It's funny, like, he's definitely gotten way more comfortable on the mic. And while, Matt, you and I have talked about, we always thought, like, people saying that he never had charisma, that's not true. That's kind of, like, he always had charisma. He definitely, early on, would, like, have trouble sometimes keeping his composure. Or even on Tonight will be a show that requires him to be kind of fake, frustrated, and he wasn't good at selling that quite yet.
No, he wasn't a good verbal actor yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
But very charming. He ends this by just saying, Bryan Danielson, he rejects Alex Shelley. He says, all I care about is the Ring of Honor title, and he just walks away.
One thing I did enjoy was that he did a promo where he was like, all I care about is winning that match tonight. And then Shelley comes, do you want to be my tag partner? And Danielson's like, were you just listening to what I just said? I like that little touch.
Yeah, that was cool. Next, we get a James Gibson backstage promo. He says last night, losing to Austin Aries for the world title, he says that was a disappointment for him, but rather than wallow in self-pity, he is going to get back on his horse by facing BJ Whitmer tonight, which, it was not intentional, but knowing for people, longtime Ring of Honor fans that knew the history of Punk relentlessly making fun of Gabe for saying that BJ Whitmer was like a horse, that got a good chuckle out of me. So I'm going to get back on the horse by facing BJ Whitmer.
Also, if this was AEW, he really would have come in on a horse. One thing I noticed about Gibson's promo here, it was good, but very breathy. He was like, I'm so upset about losing to Austin Aries, but BJ Whitmer.
Really good dramatic pauses.
Yes,
really, that come to it.
Really good.
And also the camera was sort of right in front of his face during the time. Like at least Danielson, he sort of had to back up a little bit. And it's something where, I think when you're that close to somebody, you're going to notice their pauses.
That's true.
And so Gibson just says his goal tonight is just to win any one of the 3 Ring of Honor titles. That's his new goal. So I guess he's just moving on from winning the world title to any title. Alex Shelley at this point again interrupts. He apologizes to Gibson for costing him those extra 5 minutes when Aries went to a time limit draw with Gibson a few shows back, and Shelley interrupted. Shelley says they both like Bud Light. Gibson likes John Deere tractors, and Shelley thinks they're okay. And then Alex at this point asks Gibson, would you be my tag partner tonight? Gibson angrily turns him down. He points out exactly what Shelley just pointed out, that Shelley pulled crap on him in Boston on that show against Aries, and he just walks away. And Shelley at this point says this is getting ridiculous, that everyone's turning him down. Next, we have Austin Aries, Roderick Strong, and Jack Evans cutting a backstage promo. Very front-loaded promos on the show tonight.
It's just Austin Aries doing the promo.
Yeah, I mean, the other 2 guys are there, but yeah, it's just an Aries promo.
Yeah.
Aries says they're back in Chicago, the home of his beloved Chicago Cubs, and where he beat Samoa Joe in their world title rematch. Aries says tonight he continues the most demanding and toughest schedule any champion has ever taken on. He says last night he beat James Gibson. Tonight he'll beat Bryan Danielson. And then tomorrow he'll get on a plane and beat Super Crazy in his hometown, which in fact is true. He did actually wrestle Super Crazy and I believe Ricky Marvin in a 3-way in Mexico the next day. Aries says he's going to prove he's the most dominant champion in Ring of Honor history, and Jack and Roddy are going to take out Alex Shelley tonight once and for all. So,
Aries as a promo was interesting at this point because his promos usually weren't very good in ROH. At this point, not ever. But the night before at the final showdown, his promo was pretty good. But if you remember, Trevor, I showed you a clip I found online of an indie promo that he did like a couple of years before this, and like he had a lot of personality. He wasn't great or anything, but like much more so than he was showing here. So I think he was just kind of trying to find his character and like what ROH would accept. I don't know, but I feel like as he became closer to himself, he became a better promo.
Do you think it was the standard issue, collared shirt that he had to wear for all these promos?
Yeah, it was the shirt. I blame the shirt.
Shirt, necklace, and sunglasses combo, which really is, the markings of a great champion. If I had all three of those, I too could be ROH heavyweight champion. You know, I was really hoping after the first two promos that Alex Shelley would show up there for a second and be like, "Hey guys, oh wait, never mind," you know, like, and at least continue that theory throughout the whole show.
That honestly would have been great. Like, they really should have done that. I'm not even joking.
Like, literally, all he has to do is open up a door for a second and say, "Hey guys, oh." Never mind, and just close the door. That's all.
Like Hawk walking in on that Vader promo on that WWF pre-show way back when.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that as a student of the business, like, I bet all those Gen Next guys knew about that. And it was really good that basically this was, as you mentioned before, an Austin Aries promo, because Jack Evans and Roderick Strong got their orders to take Alex Shelley out once and for all, and then they don't say anything. Or just, that's it. we gotta go get ready. Maybe the arcade games that are by the gym area are opened up.
Ooh, arcade games.
So, you know, I would like to note that I definitely enjoy Alex Shelley being, you know, squirrely, as I like to call here. Just trying to sit there and interfere on every promo. And there are some promos later on in the night where I wish he would just show up asking for, you know, just for people to be his friend constantly.
Yeah, he's really good at being kind of the smarmy, almost a little bit pathetic. I mean, I guess, you know, this is an old reference, but I know, like, in the 80s they would say, oh, like, Jim Cornette plays like an Eddie Haskell character for Leave It to Beaver, which is even before my time, but I know enough to know, for those who don't, that Eddie Haskell would be like the kind of shitty neighbor who would always suck up to, like, the Beaver's parents, but he was deep down a little shit, and you knew he was a little shit. And Alex Shelley is so good at that sometimes, even when I think, like, we've had a problem lately on the show, Matt and I think, like, sometimes telling, like, when did they start telegraphing Alex Shelley's heel turn, which is coming up in a few shows? And when was that not yet a plan? Because the problem is, like, sometimes even when Alex Shelley's trying to be a face, you still almost want to just assume that he's being an asshole. It's almost like that old Kids in the Hall skit where Dave Foley played the guy whose voice was naturally sarcastic. So even when he wasn't being sarcastic, everyone just thought everything he said was sarcastic. And I feel like Alex Shelley has a little of that, where it's hard for him to be a face because you just naturally think everything he says is, like, disingenuous.
I think everyone has been waiting the entire length of this show for you to make a Dave Foley reference.
Finally,
on the show.
66 shows.
Yeah.
I actually had that on the top right of the bingo card, guys. So I think we'll be good. If someone could make a state reference and talking about Jamie Gibson, I might win before that we get to the third match.
The other thing that Trevor finally admitted was that that Leave It to Beaver is before his time. So he is not, in fact, everybody, older than 70.
As someone that knows who Leave It to Beaver is, I would like to tell you that yes, he definitely is not my age.
I definitely, just my body feels that old. I am not actually that old. But moving on, James Gibson, our opening match of the show, James Gibson defeated BJ Whitmer via submission in 13 minutes, 4 seconds when he made BJ tap out to the guillotine choke. Matt, you know, James Gibson, this is probably like the lowest profile match he's on Ring of Honor so far. He's getting the opener. He's working BJ Whitmer, although I guess technically he's a tag team champ. But what do you think about this?
Yeah, this is the second match of the weekend that's sort of like a name opener. You know, like the first night of the double shot had Shelley versus Strong. This has one of the tag champs versus the guy who just had his world title shot the night before. So this isn't like your standard issue undercard, lower card opener. And, you know, I think they work it a little bit more hard-hitting than your typical opener as well. And it was definitely action-packed and entertaining. They did a lot of legwork earlier in the match that didn't really lead to anything later on. There are actually a few matches on this show where that's sort of a complaint that I have. And, you know, it kind of gets into like a little bit of move spamming near the end, but it was entertaining. Like it was a solid match. I don't think either of them were shooting for the moon here, but it was, you know, the Gibson, his execution, we always say it. It's great. His selling when he was selling was good. And Whitmer's selling was good for a little while too. They just sort of forgot it near the end. But like they're just like little touches. I don't even know if they're like intentional touches, but just things that I enjoyed. Like when Gibson did an Indian Deathlock and Whitmer says, "Fuck you, pal," and slaps his way out. I like the idea of wrestlers just like aggressively calling each other pal during the match. I feel like that should have just been a thing. It's like, no, I'm going to hit you, pal, and then just like trying to say pal in a more angry sounding way.
Or if it escalates from pal to buddy.
Yeah.
And then maybe no, I'm not going to do that, friend.
Yeah. Compadre by the end. Comrade. Ooh, that would be good.
Chief.
Yeah. But they did not go that route. It was not an escalating terms of endearment match, which you should book it, Keith, for your next show.
I'm thinking of new match ideas on a daily basis, and 90% of the times I think of are utter crap. But a terms of endearment match, where basically the first one to sit there and say "I love you" loses.
Yeah,
it's sort of like an I Quit match. But it's sort of like a Stages of Hell, where it's sort of, I would think you would have, pal would be on the bottom, then buddy, then maybe compadre, and sit there and see who eventually sits there and says that they love the other person.
What I think you should do is have the terms of endearment on poles in four corners. And you have to get one. One has to be taken down from every single pole before someone can grab the ladder and get "I love you" from the top of the hanging from the ceiling. That's my idea.
Maybe Ultimate X style, but with the San Francisco 49ers buckets on each side, with the "I love you" being in a big, huge heart up in the middle, as opposed to this big, weird X or some sort of championship title, or maybe an "I love you" championship belt that the other person has to wear for 60 days.
All right. Well, we settled it.
Matt, I think you've inadvertently come up with the perfect blow-off match for the old Team Hell No feud. I think terms of endearment match, maybe guest ref Shirley MacLaine just for the little wink, and the therapist on the outside is look, the only way you guys are going to settle this is it's not about being each other, it's about being able to admit how you really feel, and then the old terms from the promotion that brought you the Good Housekeeping match, the terms of endearment match.
Yeah, well, Shirley MacLaine is almost 90, so I feel like we should just get that out of the way right now. Keith, book it. So while Shirley MacLaine is still able to get in there, maybe Bryan Danielson will be available soon. Just get it done. Anyway,
he would love this. And by the way, also the fact Shirley MacLaine probably knows what Leave It to Beaver is. And the other fact is, if we have to bring in Trevor McLean, this would have to become one of them sponsorship deals, guys. So that's sort of killing it out. So maybe we could sit there and hire a Shirley MacLaine impersonator at a lower rate. So
yeah. So James Gibson hits a running knee to BJ's head, and that gets good. No. Actually, there was one spot that I really did like. No, before I say that, here's one note that I enjoyed. I forgot about this. So Gibson, he goes for a neck breaker on BJ Whitmer, but he doesn't grasp his head at all, and he just sort of pulls BJ down by his hair. And Punk, I couldn't tell if he was trying to be funny or if he just wasn't really paying attention, but he goes, "Nice neck breaker," says it real seriously, and it wasn't. He just was falling, and he yanked BJ's ponytail. And then another spot that I really liked was Gibson, he was in a pinning position and he flips back from it onto Whitmer, and with Whitmer in a front guillotine choke, and Whitmer makes the ropes, and the spot had a delayed pop because it took the crowd a second to realize what was happening. They saw Gibson get out of the pinning combination, but it was oh, wait a second, he's in the choke now, and that was pretty cool. So Whitmer got the ropes, and then Gibson put the choke back on. But then picked him up and drove him into the turnbuckle. Oh, BJ picked him up, drove him into the turnbuckle, hit an exploder, then went for the wrist clutch with Gibson reversed into the roll up, then a big clothesline. Then Whitmer goes for the top rope exploder, but Gibson reversed it into an inverted DDT. Gets a 2 count, goes right into the choke and gets the tap out. So that's what I sort of mean by kind of move spamming near the end, a bunch of 2 counts and stuff. And they just sort of ignored all the leg stuff they did early. But I still thought it was entertaining. I think it could have been better, but like I said, I don't think they were really shooting for the moon. It was definitely above average. And, I just enjoyed Gibson's little touches and stuff. So a term of endearment I would give this match is good.
Keith, what did you think about this? Would you give this a term of endearment or just a term of ambivalence?
I will sit there and give it a swell rating because I enjoyed this. I thought this was a fine opener. These guys knew each other going into this and were friends. And I think every time you have friends wrestling each other, they'll sit there and try and pull the best out of each other. There was one odd moment, though, and I don't know if you guys caught this. Gibson went for a sunset flip on on BJ and was holding BJ down. And usually by the sunset flip, you're holding them by the side. As he was doing the sunset flip, he was rolling forward and basically was putting pressure on BJ's taint while he was sitting there. And I'm surprised this was not the finish of the match because it was just very odd looking. It's just like some sort of, a taint driver 98 or something like that. But no, it was enjoyable. I mean, your announced team here is Punk and Prazak, and I thought they had some really nice interchanges as Punk basically was just talking about just killing Jimmy Rave tonight and how that was going to be great. Also mentioning how he's going to disfigure him, and it's going to be great. And then at one point, he called BJ Whitmer a tag team specialist. And really, I always think of, when I think of tag team specialists, Jannetty, Michaels, Whitmer. But I mean, Whitmer, however, held the tag team belts with multiple partners in Ring of Honor, so that makes a lot of sense. But it was a fun, swell little opener, and I thought both guys worked really hard. I mean, BJ Whitmer was one of those guys that was always very solid in there. I wouldn't sit there and say every once in a while he would do something that was spectacular, but in general, he was a good hand, so to speak, in the ring. So it was a nice, fun little opener that didn't outlast its welcome, and I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed this match maybe a little less than you guys. I would give it like what they say, the gentleman's 3, like just a solid 3 stars, which is perfectly fine.
That's pretty similar to what I would give it, I would say.
Okay,
I think maybe just our different perceptions of how good how much of an honor a 3-star match is.
Definitely. But like you said, Matt, there was the thing where Gibson really zeroes in on Whitmer's leg, and then gets kind of largely ignored after there's this one run where he's really all over it, and you think, wow, this is going to be a big story of the rest of the match, and then it really isn't. Like Matt, you were saying also how it kind of spams finishers at the end. I actually thought, I agree it was just kind of do big moves, but I thought that was also exciting. And yeah, it was a good solid opener. It didn't have to be great. It's funny because I was slightly disappointed just because at this point my standards for James Gibson are so high, but I mean, this was perfectly a good opener. And I always try and pick out now basically every Gibson match, some little thing he does. And the thing I really liked on this match, I always just try and find a detail because he's the master of the little things, is there's a moment where, in the match where Whitmer is choking Gibson on the ropes and they stop, and then, Gibson then takes a different bump for a different move, and Gibson basically he acts all stunned and wobbly, and he wobbles over halfway across the ring and drapes himself over the rope so that BJ can choke him again. And in so many other wrestlers on paper that sounds just ridiculous, but the way Gibson sells it, the wobble all the way over, you believe it and you go that makes sense. But it's also at the same time you can tell clearly he's walking over halfway across the ring and putting himself in position for this next move. But just so many other wrestlers I feel it would just be almost business exposing. But he, again, just the acting and the way he sells it, you're like, oh yeah, he just was really out of sorts and walked halfway across the ring and then slumped on the ropes perfectly to get choked again. And again, it's just that little stuff like that where you go, well, what makes James Gibson great? And that that doesn't sound like the coolest thing, but Gibson is just full of little details like that that a lot of guys wouldn't pick up on or really execute well. But, after the match, BJ shoves Gibson away. He's angry. He lost the match. That actually gets fairly big boos, and then there's a big shake his hand chant, and then eventually the two shake, and they even hug. So truly, again, like Keith said, they were friends in real life. So, and this was also a show I felt where the crowd, you could tell they were a hot crowd, but there were moments where it felt like they weren't mic'd great, or maybe the audio mix wasn't great. It was one of those shows where you could tell, I felt during this match, you could tell the crowd absolutely loved James Gibson, but it also sounded like it wasn't quite getting completely made, probably what it sounded like live.
Yeah, when you say it wasn't mic great, I think I've mentioned this before, do indie shows mic the crowd? I mean, obvious. In 2005?
In certain independent promotions, and I'm not going to name names, AAWpro.com, We usually will not mic the crowd, but hopefully we'll have the announcer somewhere by the crowd, because there's good and bad things about micing the crowd.
Yeah.
The good thing is you can get a feel for what the room is. The bad thing is if you have an asshole who keeps on talking constantly during the show, you basically get his numbers. But at times I felt that this crowd was mic'd great, because there would be little things that someone would yell and I would hear them directly, and I was like, oh yeah, I think I know who said that. Was it me? And then I realized it wasn't me. And I have to apologize. I think I had a cold this weekend of this show, so maybe I just wasn't giving it my all. Maybe I was saving it for the steel cage match.
Yeah. Were you the guy who yelled that it was going to be Jimmy Rave's Waterloo? And then said, haven't you heard of Napoleon?
Like I would say, as a big fan of ABBA, there was.
This is going to be your Mamma Mia.
That was I was going to say that Mauro Ranallo would be in the crowd saying that.
Yeah.
Well, there was something, and I know we'll talk about this match in a little. There was a match later on in the show with the Nigel McGuinness and Colt where there was an accidental low blow. And literally, as the crowd was sort of quiet with this accidental low blow, someone yelled as loud as they could, "Try and walk it off."
It's good advice.
So the next match on the show is actually the only match on the show that does not make this DVD, and maybe it's good that it didn't, because what was next was a 4-corner survival match. Matt Sydal defeated Ace Steel, Matt Stryker, and the masked Wisconsin superstar, who was actually H.C. Loke.
One of my favorite kinds of matches. It was a double mat match.
It was actually, I believe it was DeVito, not Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no, thank God. Thank you. Because, I did not know that. That makes me wonder, did we get Loke right when we said he was the masked New York superstar yesterday on the last show?
I think Shane Hagedorn said he was when on an honorable mention when he covered the final showdown. So that's why I thought it was him. Well, not this time, but that time. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a Ring of Honor mystery, folks. The most tantalizing of them all. But
someone text message Hagedorn right now, please.
But anyway, this match had 2 mats, so I loved it. But I never saw it. Just loved it.
But from the PW Insider Live report from Justin Carling, he wrote watching this match at the time, he says, the ring broke during this match, causing a 15 to 20-minute delay. So I don't know if that's why they didn't put this match on the show, because there was seemed like there was fairly judicious editing of the entrances, and they still barely got the show in under the 3-hour.
Yeah, it would have had to have been a double DVD at this point if they were gonna do it. Yeah.
But I mean, also probably having the ring break during this. So that's why presumably that's why this next segment happened, because what we get next is the embassy of Jimmy Rave, Prince Nana, and Jade Chung. They just walk to the ring. The crowd chants, "Punk's gonna kill you" at Jimmy. Nana grabs the mic and manhandles Jade Chung as usual. He grabs her roughly by the arm and the hair, and he calls her Jackie Chan before he orders her to be a footstool for Rave.
And Punks calls her Wang Chung, which I guess is more of a play on words than it is racist. But the other one was definitely racist.
Yes.
I wrote my notes. This gets possibly more cheers than boos. I think it got a bit of both, but I think the cheers actually outnumbered the boos on that. I mean,
Chicago's a big Jackie Chan town, though, so they maybe just got confused real quick. I don't know.
So the crowd chants for Nana to shut the fuck up, which is now happening basically every time Nana cuts a promo.
It's his signature chant, yeah.
Exactly, at this point. Nana shits on Chicago. He mocks people in the crowd before demanding respect for Jimmy Rave. Rave at this point gets on the mic and he tells Nana he's not doing the cage match tonight. He says these people don't even deserve it. Nana agrees that they don't deserve it, but he reminds Rave of all the perks he's given Rave, like limousines, Jade Chung. And he says, look, I've signed you to do a job, and tonight you're going to do your job and finish off CM Punk. The crowd chants, "You're Punk's bitch," as the segment ends. So yeah, I watching this before I kind of remembered on the research that the ring broke, I was like, why the heck are they just doing kind of a random promo segment that doesn't really add anything? But apparently, especially apparently when I paid closer attention, I think you can see people in the background running to fix the ring. I don't know exactly how the ring broke, if it was I don't know what, but I mean, this was obviously literally just there to stall for time, was probably completely unplanned, but I mean, perfectly fine piece of mic work, but this is not typically something Ring of Honor did.
Even with Prince Nana calling my hometown, Chicago, Illinois, saying that we are in the bottom of the cesspool, you still have to love Nana.
Yes, not a fantastic performer. And that brings us to Chad Collier defeating Jimmy Jacobs via submission in 10 minutes, 46 seconds. We made him tap out to the Texas Cloverleaf. Keith, what did you think about this match? The tag champs going down in straight singles matches.
Well, first of all, if you remember the last time I was on the show, the big gimmick that we had was you had a lovely recap of the report that I had written, that I had, painstakingly probably spent being up till 5 a.m. The day of the show, basically writing up to send to all the masses. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like I wrote a magnum opus for this show. However, you did share with me something I wrote to the lovely people at the PW Torch, and I will read that right now in my review of this match. So, Chad Collier defeated Jimmy Jacobs. Collier won with his Texas Cloverleaf submission. Lipinski said this was bad. Yes, a very much in-depth journalism that you come to expect from the Dr.Keith name. Yeah, I enjoyed this match a lot more now than back then when I said it was quote-unquote bad, although I gave no context to what made it bad. I would sit there and say, was this match 5 stars? No. But was this match very entertaining? Yes. Did it make me miss Jimmy Jacobs? Because I think in general, when a lot of people think about Jimmy Jacobs, they have to remember how long of a career this guy had and just the different types of matches that he'd have with people. Did it make me miss Chad Collier? It maybe made me miss the Metal Master a little bit. But, I enjoyed the match. There was some fun little parts in this. There were some nice, reversals. Punk went into what Chad Collier usually ate and basically said he ate ice cream and 6 beers a day, which, honestly, frankly, sounds like a fantastic diet. If those are the results. I mean, I had ice cream and 6 beers, only 6 beers a day. And I looked like Chad Collier and had the charisma and raw sensuality of Chad Collier. I'd probably go on the Chad Collier diet. But, I thought I enjoyed this match. I thought it was very, very good.
I would say that I like this match. I would put just probably a hair under the opener. I think like the opener, it's, another match where there's no real story and there's no real issue going in or even coming out. It's just basically to set up future tag title challengers. Collier didn't do much mat work here. I think Collier sometimes people just think of him as the mat work guy, but he could work kind of just a more quote unquote like the modern indie match of the day, like the more action packed. I mean, he even flies here. I also think Jimmy Jacobs, Jimmy Jacobs is one of those wrestlers. He's very divisive. I like Jimmy Jacobs quite a bit. And I think one of the reasons why he's divisive is you see in this match where Jimmy Jacobs, like he does, he has a little bit of flying, like the big senton he always does that just crushes people. But like when he's on offense, when you see in matches like this, like he doesn't work like you expect a super tiny guy to do. Like he does a lot of brawling. He does like battering around shoulders. He loves to do into guys midsections. Like he wrestles like a little Spitfire. And I feel like a lot of people look at a guy of Jimmy Jacobs' kind of stature and build, and they just think, okay, you've got to wrestle like a member of Special K, a member of you got to wrestle like Jack Evans or something. And I feel like maybe that throws some people off because it's just the expectations game of, oh, he's brawling more. He's maybe people that are. I know people that love Jimmy Jacobs used to compare him to like an Eddie Gilbert, but if you're one generation removed from that, maybe you're just ingrained in your brain that small guy that's not muscular has to be high flyer, and he isn't. And in this match, while he picks his spots, he isn't. But I think this is a good, decent, second match on the card, although I guess technically third. And the other thing I'll point out is before the start of the match, we get a "You beat Eddie" chant, and for those wondering who go back and watch us why that happened, it's because this was one of those times where Jimmy Jacobs had just wrestled Eddie Guerrero, I think on SmackDown, in a match where like Eddie is just wrestling some schlub, quote unquote, and I think he loses by DQ, and so the crowd just kind of acknowledging that. But Matt, what did you think about the match?
Yeah, I in our rewatch, I've never been anything but impressed by Jimmy Jacobs and his stuff, in what we've watched so far. I think he's a very consistent, solid wrestler. So I definitely don't see why anybody would have. I mean, maybe the stuff he did later on was more indulgent, but he's good. Like, he's good for his position. And I actually thought in some ways this match was better than the opener. Like, it was maybe not as exciting. Like, they were, neither of these two are as big of, I guess, ROH stars as Gibson and Whitmer, especially Collier, who's only around sporadically. But I thought they did a good job. I think it told a more sound story in terms of, they did do some back work, which actually played into the finish because of the Texas Cloverleaf. Whether it was tilt-a-whirl backbreakers or German suplexes. Actually, Collier hit a really high-angle bridging German suplex at one point, and both Jacobs landed at a really high angle, and Collier's bridge had a really high angle, and I thought that was pretty cool. Collier got him in like a Brunar Sammartino over-the-shoulder style backbreaker. They went to the floor a little bit. I don't know. It was nothing super memorable, but I thought it was very solidly worked, and I thought and Collier winning got a big pop. So I don't know if that's for Collier himself or just the concept of the tag champions both tapping out in a row. But I thought it was a solid concept. It did build to 2 tag team title matches, which is what you want. So good stuff. I thought pretty good.
And so we go backstage at this point to Alex Shelley, who is bummed that no one's going to be his tag partner tonight. Shelley says he can't say he blames anybody for feeling that way, but he points out that he's owned up to everything he's done in his past. Shelley then says he was the brains of Generation X, but he's made his bed and now he's going to have to lie in it. Gabe does his usual thing where he says cut from behind the camera. Shelley sighs. Gabe wishes him good luck tonight. Shelley says he's going to need it. Shelley then takes 2 steps, and we then see that the entire promo inexplicably was cut in the bathroom.
Because that's always funny. And what? All wrestlers think that's hilarious. So guess where most wrestlers want to cut promos, guys? I'll take a hint.
The bathroom. Clearly the best acoustics.
That's
a big reason why, actually.
Keith, you've shot a lot of promos. How many have been in the bathroom? What % would you say?
I would sit there and say a good 25%.
Wow.
Because at one time, though, the bathroom at the Berwyn Eagles Club was one of the quietest places that you could actually shoot promos in. So for a quiet aspect, the only problem is you have to sit there and have someone guard the door while you're shooting a promo in the bathroom. And then that just sounds incredibly it sounds very not so good.
Yes,
it's important to wash your hands after every promo.
Well, that's a good thing. I actually wash my hands and wash my eyes out after every promo,
Nice.
after every cringeworthy promo I did. So, the most important thing about this promo is we never see Alex Shelley use the bathroom. So we don't know. That would make sense why he'd be in there unless we saw other he sort of figured out that the showers at the Frontier Park Fieldhouse were right by there. So the wrestlers would basically have to walk by there. So potentially he was looking for people to sit there. And the other thing that would have been funnier if Shelley told the guys, you want to wrestle again? Because I bet I'll get you a double payday, bud. And then there'd be a slew of wrestlers that would come by him.
So, the rest of the promo, this is the part that I thought was hilarious, where at this point in the promo, Shelley takes 2 steps. We see that the entire promo has been shot in the bathroom, but then Shelley then goes to open to a stall, presumably to use the bathroom himself, and for some reason the camera stays on and follows him, and it's and clearly it's to capture what comes next, but in that moment, if you're following just the storyline logic, why is the cameraman going to follow Alex Shelley as he goes to use a bathroom? I don't know, but it's a weird moment. But
I'm canceling this cameraman
already, though, where he's followed. He's basically, what he's doing? He's got the hots for Alex Shelley. He's hoping that Shelley was going to ask him to be his tag team partner. It's just something where maybe it's doing spending the day, my dream day with Alex Shelley, where he asks other people to be his partners, but not me.
This show truly was the mystery date of promos, but so he goes to open the stall, the camera stays on him, and then we see that a fully clothed, geared up Delirious is just squatting on the toilet, mouth wide open, blank-faced, emotionless. Shelley asks if he'd like to be his partner tonight. Delirious still says nothing, doesn't change his expression. Shelley points out that they both like the color green, still no reaction from Delirious. Shelley finally just says, look, Delirious, if you want to be my tag partner, just don't respond. Delirious does nothing, so Shelley excitedly just goes, got me a tag partner, and there we go. So tonight it will be Delirious and Alex Shelley against Generation Next. And this was still early in the time, I feel like, before Delirious's comedy. Like, people, I think, were still really kind of having fun with exploring, like, having Delirious around in comedy segments backstage, and the fans were still really into his comedy, during matches where maybe it would start to kind of burn people out. But this was very kind of in the heyday of Delirious comedy, so I could see it being like a very well-received moment, like, oh, isn't this neat? But that brings us to the third match on the DVD. Homicide defeats Doug Williams via pinfall in 19 minutes flat when he counters a roll-up into a pin. Matt, I'm going to go cover the next match first. So I'm going to have Matt, how about you start us off on this one? What did you think? According to commentary, I believe Punk said on commentary, I think, that this was, maybe Punk, maybe it was Priest, like I forget who, that this was, like, I think, a first time ever meeting for these two, which, seems a little bit crazy, but I guess, Williams didn't always come over that often, but, two big names wrestling here.
Yeah, another match I really enjoyed. I thought this was the best match so far. It's interesting. Like I've mentioned this before, Homicide is much more willing than the other guys that you consider like elite level ROH main eventers to do these undercard matches where he just wrestles. And maybe to some people that doesn't really stick with his character, especially right after he lost a big match. You'd think he'd be really angry and frustrated, and he just ends up doing a wrestling match. But I like it. I think it's a cool way that, change of pace, especially after Homicide just had so many of these big brawling matches over the past few months with Danielson. And this was just a nice, refreshing change of pace. You just sort of got to see a little bit of that, almost that like 2003 Homicide. It's a little bit of the Homicide that wrestled Danielson in the first time they wrestled the year before, just where he does wrestling. They go right into it right away. There's no like stare down or anything like that. They just grab each other's arms, get to the mat. Then Doug Williams is kind of switching around. He goes from the arm, he goes to the leg. At one point, Punk goes to Prasak. He goes, "Who do you think would win in a fight, Malcolm X or Winston Churchill?" Now, I was thinking about this question because it's like, okay, I get why he says Churchill, right? Because Doug Williams is British.
Yeah.
What does Homicide have to do with Malcolm X? I'm like, this feels like a problematic comparison. I'm not really sure what he's going for there, but that notwithstanding, Doug does one of those dealies where he like ties up all of Homicide's limbs in a ball to frustrate him, which I always enjoy. More wrestlers should tie their opponents up in a ball. I feel like that would be like there should be a show where everyone does that. Keith, book it.
I'm writing this down right now.
Yes.
I can't tell, 'cause I'm sitting there trying to figure out why Homicide was called Malcolm X, and I did notice that. That was a big thing that I noticed on commentary. And then also Punk mentioning about the crowd being appreciative of Doug Williams and saying something about creepy British styles, which, in this timeline, the phrase wrestler and creepy British styles has a completely new meaning.
Punk new. Hashtag Punk new.
Oh my God. Do not get that started. Now Doug is going to work on Homicide's neck. Homicide goes to work on Doug Williams's back. So they're going around there. So there's this cool spot where Doug goes for the chaos theory. Homicide lands on his feet, drop kicks Doug out of the ring and hits the tope con hilo, and the crowd just goes wild for that. Then they fight on the outside and they throw each other into guardrails because, what is an ROH show without lots of that? At one point, Homicide just takes a chair and throws it at Doug Williams' face because in Homicide matches, chairs are legal. We've established this from our viewing, right? There's never been a time when Homicide has not been allowed to use a chair in a match for no reason. And I'm still actually thinking about this. There really, still to this point, are not really disqualifications in ROH, right?
No.
They've never advertised that fact about ROH, that they don't have disqualifications, but practically speaking, they really don't. I feel like I'm trying to think of like matches where a disqualification happened, and was it Jody Fleisch against Red? Did that match, was that like the only match that had a disqualification finish? I'm sure there are others if I think hard about it, but
my memory is terrible, but probably, and I guess we'll be seeing more disqualifications with the Nigel McGuinness Pure title reign, won't we? Because won't that start to come into play more?
I don't even know, honestly, because I feel like with disqualifications, titles change hands on disqualifications when the pure title matches. But maybe I'm wrong about that. It's hard for me to remember. Anyway, I guess we'll see. But yeah, so Doug gets a little momentum. Homicide cuts him off with an eye poke, taking us back to the most popular ROH move of 2004. And he does some back rakes, which are even cooler. And one of my favorite parts of the match, actually, is when the ref admonishes Homicide while he's doing this. So Homicide holds up his hand, like threatening to rake the referee's back, which I think would probably be the best disqualification of all time. Like, a wrestler gets disqualified for raking the referee's back. Keith, writing this down. But
right. Well, it would be like sort of a massaging the referee, which is even worse in this day and age.
That's right. So Homicide, at one point, he winds up for the lariat, and usually when he winds up and telegraphs it, he doesn't hit it, and that is what happens this time as well. Williams blocks it. Homicide comes back quickly. He goes up top. Doug catches him and hits a gut wrench off the ropes for a 2 count. There's a few more near falls, blocks the ace crusher. Doug hits his own ace crusher and hits a bomb scare, and that's a really good near fall. Like, he really hit that knee drop right there. Homicide cuts off Doug Williams on the top with an eye rake, hits the top rope ace crusher, and hits the lariat, and Doug kicks out. And that's one of the rare near falls that, even watching back, got me. Like, I was like, oh, that's got to be the finish, where the ace crusher followed by the lariat, and the crowd went nuts, and they're all on their feet. Like, they really got the crowd really into this match by the end. Homicide went for a victory roll, and Williams threw him off, hit the Chaos Theory, but he can't hold the bridge because of his back and his neck. And Homicide rolls out of the ring, and they chant "Fly, Doug, fly!" And Doug Williams does do a top rope crossbody to the floor. Not the most graceful dive, but Doug Williams doing that at all is cool.
Yeah, he's a big dude who's not known for a ton of that other than the bomb scare.
Yeah. Doug Williams hits another suplex, I think it was a tiger suplex this time. Again, can't hold the bridge, and that allows Homicide to hit an exploder. He went for the cop killer, but Williams reversed to the Chaos Theory. Homicide reversed and got a quick pinning combination and cradle for the flash pin. I'm never a huge fan of flash pin finishes. They, I don't know, they usually just feel anticlimactic to me, especially when a match is really dramatic down the stretch, and I felt like this one was. I thought it could have used a more dramatic finish, but storytelling was pretty tight. The selling played into the match a lot more than it did in the first two. A lot more than it did in the first match, I should say. In the second match, it did. And I don't know, I thought it was really good. I just don't love these kinds of finishes. That's the only thing that really took it down for me.
I agree that this is the best match on the show so far, but I didn't think it was that much better than the first two, which was a little disappointing. It was a good match, better than the first two, but with these two, obviously my expectations are super high. I felt like
even for a third match, you would expect like a real classic match between these two.
Well, if you tell me Homicide and Doug Williams are going for 19 minutes, like I almost don't. I would expect a lot even in third match on the show, kind of, but. I feel like both these guys worked super hard. There was it's just that other than they're kind of naturally working on a little bit on body parts. Again, I think that one of the stories of the first half of this show is that none of the matches in the first half really had any issue to them, and it kind of felt like it was just even between the stories going into the matches, even how they worked them was kind of just good wrestling for good wrestling's sake, which I like sometimes. But like in Ring of Honor, usually a lot of the matches have a bit more going into it, juice going into it, and maybe a bit more character and emotion. But this, I thought both guys worked really hard. Like I said, I did think that there were a few moments where they didn't quite work great, like just tiny bits of awkwardness. Like there's a moment where Homicide does an overhead belly to belly. It looks like he just barely gets the guy over. When Williams does that ace crusher, it's not a very good. It's one of those things where a wrestler does another wrestler's move just because it's appropriate for the match, but you can tell they don't usually do that move. There was a moment where one wrestler, I think Homicide leaps frogs over the other, and you can tell he just barely gets over. Just little things that aren't outright botches, but you can tell, just a few months where things weren't quite clicking. But overall, they worked pretty well together. And A couple other things I noticed in this match. I noticed there's a big duct-taped X over one of the turnbuckle pads.
Yes.
And I have to wonder, I didn't notice that in the first two matches, so I have to wonder, did the ring crew, like, put this on the turnbuckle to, like, connotate, like, this is where the ring got broke. This is the corner, like, be careful, because I did not notice that in the first couple of matches, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Probably is what they did. Yeah.
They couldn't maybe completely fix it, and they just had to say, well, we'll put a giant X on this turnbuckle to let you know, like, be careful.
That's how we know it's injured. The X up. So
when Peter Cass, after he got injured and had his career ended in that Evolve show where the ring broke, they just permanently put an X on the turnbuckle there for the rest of Evolve. Just be careful, folks. But I like this match. I'm probably being a little hard just because, again, it's one of those matches where my expectations for these two guys are sky high. And I also think, Matt, this is the last time we see Doug Williams in Ring of Honor for quite a while, I believe. Like, quite a while, I think. So we'll miss our big meat British beef boy for a while. But
I really enjoyed it. I don't know. I thought it was a lot of fun.
I thought it was a fun match as well. I mean, I thought it was there was a lot of fun things on there. One of the things I enjoy sometimes is taking something little small that's going on during the match and actually focusing on it. And in this case, it was the bandana of Homicide. I was waiting to see how long he would take before that bandana would actually get off of his head. I call that the X-Pac bandana rule. And it was probably a good 15 minutes into the match where it finally got off. And when it comes off, like I think I could actually sort of see myself standing up and going, yay. But yeah, the table, the chair thing, throwing the chair, apparently that's not a disqualification. I did enjoy how Homicide was so upset that he flipped the table over, but he did such a wonderful job of flipping the table over, sort of like playing a big game of flip cup, where literally the table just went nicely over and just landed on its top. So, and more importantly, I think this was a third match in a row where we saw multiple crossbodies. So this is a time in independent pro wrestling where crossbodies were at its peak. And of course, Homicide wins due to wrestling. So yeah, I thought it was a fun little match.
So after the match, we get clips of Jay Lethal from Back to Basics as a Lenny Leonard voiceover tells us that Lethal has experienced numbness and lack of mobility from a neck injury caused by the Rottweilers, and it's unknown when or even if he'll ever return, but Lethal has insisted he will return, and soon, to Ring of Honor, and he has sworn revenge on the Rottweilers. So basically very similar to what they did the show before, just a little clip, even though, this showed you that even though he had just lost the Pure title, Ring of Honor was still into pushing Jay Lethal, so he couldn't they didn't book him for this double shot, but they still wanted to kind of keep you and keep him in your mind. I always love, by the way, on the previous match, I always love on the commentary on the previous match, they talk about, the Rottweilers, Julius Smokes and the Rottweilers have been banned for this weekend of shows. And that's always one of my favorite Ring of Honor things, wherein certain wrestlers that weren't booked for the Midwest tour because they could only pay for so many guys to travel, they would often find the excuse to say, oh, they've been suspended for this weekend, because of the nefariousness that they've recently caused.
Attention to detail. That's what we liked about ROH, right?
Yeah, they would go the extra mile to try and explain it away.
But Jay Lethal does he makes his return, I believe, at The Future Is Now, which is the next New York City show, and my first ever ROH show, which is 2 shows away from this one. But I know, Keith, that you had something you wanted to mention involving Jay Lethal.
Yes. So I like to hammer these guys online asking, when can I show up on your podcast again? Because I don't have a podcast currently. Like Dr. Keith Presents is dead. I'm not presenting anything. So maybe Dr. Keith Presents through the years. But anyway,
I'll take it.
So I said, I was at the Future Is Now. And I have some good stories behind The Future Is Now. Can I come on your show? And you guys are like, no, sorry, we got someone else. Your ratings last time were way down. I mean, you might as well just invite my fucking Bialik on to talk about her fucking cat show.
She actually is going to be on the Future Is Now episode, just FYI.
God damn it. So anyway, I went, that was the weekend of the ECW One Night Stand. So that weekend, I worked Saturday night. I worked at a bar for 13 hours. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I took a shower at the boss's house and took a cab to O'Hare. Took a fine flying airplane to New York. I believe I flew into New York, and then I took a train from Newark to New York, to New York City, because we were going to the Future Is Now show. So anyway, as I was in the train, I get on the train, in my backpack, and I'm tired and stuff like that. I look around, and who is standing right next to me? And I'm in this little train area. Right next to me is Jay Lethal, Mrs. Lethal, Jay Lethal's mom, and like a few family members. And I'm wearing I'm wearing a Ring of Honor t-shirt and like everything else. And I'm like, so you're running in today, aren't you? He's like, yeah. So it's a fantastic way to start a wonderful weekend of professional wrestling greatness. So it was something where when he does show up, spoiler alert, at the Future Is Now, it was quite nice, because it was sort of like, oh boy, look who Jay Lethal's here. I wonder how he got to the show. So I don't know necessarily if Ring of Honor paid him the trans from the subway from New Jersey to New York.
I like to think of that in kayfabe terms. Like, you caught that he was planning on legit running in to attack the Rottweilers, and he was like, yeah, don't tell the Rottweilers I'm going to attack them.
Please don't tell Homicide.
Don't tell my mom. I told her we were just going out for a nice dinner tonight, and I was going to kind of sneak away later. But
We're going to go to the Olive Garden, Mom. But before that, I have to stop at the New Yorker Hotel.
It was actually at the Supper Club, but yes. No, but that's funny because it works on both levels. It works if he got caught, do that, he's going to come and do an angle, or it works on the level of he's actually going to run in in real life and as a unplanned and attack a guy. So either way, his embarrassment works. So that's a perfect story. Thank you.
No worries.
And that brings us to Generation Next of Jack Evans and Roderick Strong defeating Alex Shelley and Delirious in 16 minutes, 33 seconds when Strong made Delirious submit to the Stronghold. So Jack Evans and Roderick Strong just do it again. This was a match when I sat down to watch this match, I forget why, but I wasn't in a great mood. And sometimes I try and pick being in a good mood when I watch wrestling for review doing this podcast, because not that we're important or anything, but I know some people in wrestling listen to the show, and just
no wonder you were hard on that Doug Williams Homicide match.
No, that was actually a different session. I knew to stop myself, man. I had to really be fair to the matches, but I don't ever want to come in feeling shitty and then just go, I didn't pay attention to that match because I was grumpy or whatever. But I started watching this match, I go, oh, this match is all right. And then it kept going, I went, oh, this match is pretty good. And by the end, I was in a good mood. I was like, man, this is an outright great match. This is my favorite match of the show so far. I actually might put this might be crazy, slightly above their tag against BJ and Jacobs at Manhattan Mayhem. I would go at least 4 stars on this. I think 4 stars is probably a good rating for this. I think this is an outright great match. And now, going in, I'll just say, look, there are flaws. Just like the other match on this show, there isn't really much of a story other than, I guess you could say, Shelley really bending Jack Evans back like Gumby's because he hates him. Jack Evans does a little bit of healing where he teases a assisted moonsault spot, but he doesn't do it. He lands on his feet because Chicago doesn't deserve it. Stuff like that.
He was right, by the way. He didn't deserve it.
Delirious acts crazy as usual, but really this match is just a lot of fun. It's the Delirious comedy, like I said before, where it was still fresh and hit well, and just Jack Evans being amazing, and really everyone being really good. Just a really fun match where there's comedy, but it builds to some really big near falls at the end, and just every moment in this match is fun, and it's just 4 really, obviously Delirious and Jack Evans are such strong personality-wise, they kind of threaten to overtake the whole match, but everyone gets their moments in here, and everyone is just really fun. I would just say this is another one of those matches that's pure fun, which I say a lot with Jack Evans this year. And right now, Matt, I don't know if I've said this on recent shows, but if we had to do the Through the Years 2005 awards right now, if we didn't watch the rest of the year, Jack Evans would be somewhere in my top 3, and it might not even be number 3 for Wrestler of the Year, because he's just been he's knocked out of the park in what he's been asked to do basically every match he's been in this year.
Yeah, the biggest development I find of Through the Years is Trevor Dane becoming the number 1 member of the Jack Evans fan club.
I mean, he has been so just great in 2005. And this is a match again where it's all about, it's just a collection of great moments. Like, again, Alex Shelley really just stretching him worse than, everyone remembers Bryan Danielson stretching Jack Evans. Alex Shelley stretches him worse. And, there's Roderick Strong nearly kills Delirious on a back suplex where you can see Delirious barely rotates onto a shoulder in time, and if he hadn't, it's one of those moments in wrestling where like the difference of like an inch or two is the difference between you breaking your neck and being completely unscathed. There's some neat double teams. There's a great Shelley one-man babyface hot tag where he fights off Jack and Roddy single-handedly. And I feel like even the great final few minutes of near falls, it's like the first time in Ring of Honor where Delirious gets to show like he could hang in the right setting in like a Ring of Honor style, like hot stretch finish of a match, where before this, like he was starting to get over, but just doing the comedy. I feel like this is the first match where he's kind of been called on to like just hold up your end in the wrestling side too, and he completely does. Just so much fun in this match. The commentary too was probably the closest we've heard of Punk and Prazak getting to their IWA Mid-South form, where they are so loose and just goofing on stuff. At one point, Punk goes, at one point Shelley spits on Strong spits back, and Punk goes, this is how diseases start. People spit at each other, someone sleeps with a chimpanzee, next thing you know, AIDS. And
interesting line to hear during a pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that was my first thought. I was like, oh my God, they totally knew that this was coming, except for the chimpanzee part.
Yes, this time somebody slept with a bat.
So much goofy stuff like Delirious antics early on gets like a rare like genuine laugh from Punk on commentary. Delirious does like the very dated at this point banana phone thing, and like Prazak actually has to like explain to Punk what banana phone is.
But he doesn't. But I know he didn't really explain it. It's like, does Prazak know who Rafi is? Because he just said ring 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 banana phone, and that was his whole explanation. But it's like, no, you got to tell the whole story. I'm just kidding.
And even again, we're talking about this. This is the episode of the podcast full of dated references. Punk gets to join in on the party because, well, he's not talking about terms of endearment or the Leave It to Beaver. He does at one point when Jack Evans doesn't throw a great looking kick. He goes, "Did he learn that from Billy Blanks doing Taibo?" Which I thought, boy, that is very. I don't know if that's even. I was going to say that's so 2005. I don't know if that's even so 2005. That might have already been an old reference.
I feel like Taibo was like 98, 99, 2000.
Yeah, the cat bow.
Yeah.
But yeah, just it's hard to really like this match. Some matches are more than some of their parts. This match is just the parts. It's just fun guys doing fun stuff, and it's exactly that good. And I really dug it a lot.
Just the parts. I like that as like a calling card.
Yeah, this match is great because of a story, or this match, it all builds, or there's just some unique chemistry. It's just four guys that are all good at doing like fun things, doing those fun things. It doesn't really become anything more than that, and it doesn't need to. So, Matt, what did you think about? I'm probably going to be the high vote on this match, but what did you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, the match was definitely like good. Like, it was a lot of fun. Like a really super entertaining match. Great final few minutes. And it was a really fun mix of comedy early and like exciting tag team spots down the stretch. And I definitely agree with you that this is Delirious's first chance to really do one of these types of matches in ROH, and he does a great job. I definitely am not as high on it as you, in that I still think that the Jacobs Whitmer match against Evans and Strong was a better match overall. And I don't think this was head and shoulders above, like, let's say the Williams versus Homicide match. I thought both were really good. But I have nothing bad to say about it. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed how much personality everybody got to show. I mean, Roderick was still kind of coming into his own with his personality. I mean, in some ways, I guess he still kind of is coming into his own with personality. But he was, really, coming on, pun intended, strong in terms of his performances. And I think this was one of his best. And I think, Evans obviously can really dominate a match in terms of personality and that helps a lot. At one point early in the match when the crowd is chanting "Die, Jack, die," he literally goes, "Yo, suck my balls," which is, not something you typically hear a wrestler scream to a crowd, but this time you heard it loud and clear. And but yeah, no, I mean, I don't really have too much to add as far as like the moves and stuff that you didn't say. At one point, when Strong does this back suplex on Delirious and drops him on his head and neck, like he drops him so high that like it didn't even look intentional. Like I don't know if it was a botch but it was amazing that Delirious was even still alive. Like I had to rewind it. It was such an incredible angle that like it was just like, wow. I mean, luckily Delirious seems to be totally fine afterward, but if this wasn't 16 years ago, I would have been really scared. But yeah, no, just a lot of, really fun sequences and a super entertaining match.
Keith, what did you think about this?
Oh, I love this. I mean, I think you really said it best. Like these four guys were so much fun. Like a big portion of what was really great about 2005 in Ring of Honor was the fact that it was these young guys, the Gen X was established the year before, and now they're definitely coming up and facing each other. And this was just really fun stuff. It would have been nice if Shelley was not loopy at one point and started asking cameramen and Mary Kate if they could be his partners, not realizing that he's in the course of the match. But no, I thought this was I think it was a good showing for Delirious. It's understandable why he took the pinfall. I thought the finish was awesome. Like I really thought the finish looked incredibly brutal. And we didn't know, I knew Delirious before and afterwards. And I want to say this match changed him forever. But no, it was really, really, really enjoyable match. Just so much. I mean, like the team of Evans and Strong was so great. And like, this is a part right now where they were getting really, really good, and we would see them in other tag team matches. They would just be such a wonderful dynamic for those two. And Jack at this time is just such a, he basically is like a kid's Super Bowl. Like at one point, Shelley, I believe, has Strong in the Border City stretch, and Jack goes to break it up, not by doing some flip, but just basically sort of just plummeting his body on Alex Shelley, not doing any sort of flip, just more just like how a kid would plummet into a waterbed and have it break, and then there would be flooding all over the house. So yeah, it was really, really enjoyable. I really, really like this. And, more importantly, Shelley didn't take the pinfall, so now he can find another tag team partner next time.
I think the biggest takeaway I had from this match is that Jack Evans could definitely suck his own dick, which was disturbing. But when you see him getting bent as far back as he gets bent, like I just had that revelation, and I'm not proud to have thought of that. I saw it, and I was just like, he is definitely that limber. When you watch some of the stretches Alex Shelley put him through, and I'm like, I don't like that I'm thinking of this, but yeah, my mind went there.
I don't like that you're thinking of it either, Trevor. Mm-hmm. No, it's okay.
It's fine. I mean, everyone thinks about that about Jack.
Yeah. Yes.
So it works perfect.
I do like that you're thinking about it.
I think everyone listening to this fucking podcast right now is thinking about it.
There was a moment we had to stop the podcast for a second, and Matt got very blue in a funny moment that will not make the podcast, and so I now just feel like I have to top him. The gauntlet has been thrown down, and you won't hear the gauntlet that Matt threw down. But
you haven't topped it yet.
So after the match, Roddy won't release the stronghold on Delirious, so Shelley gets back in the ring, and he takes him and Jack Evans out with chair shots. So he gets some measure of revenge. I think like the commentary tries to make it like almost like Shelley won, like Shelley's got their number again. But I mean, his team lost the match, but he does get some revenge after the match. That brings us next up to Nigel McGuinness defeating Colt Cabana via pinball in 13 minutes, 32 seconds with a small package after he kicks Colt Cabana quite intentionally in the balls. No denying it this time. Keith, we've on through the years seen a lot of Nigel Colt matches. I think we've enjoyed them all, but this one special because not just he got extra ball kicks in this match, but this is, I guess, the official Nigel McGuinness heel turn is really here.
Yes. When a man comes to the ring carrying a delicious iron, You could tell it's clobbering time. Yeah, it was an enjoyable match. I thought these guys always worked pretty well with each other. And like it definitely was setting up Nigel becoming sort of a bad guy, that bad British guy, although he would always do the up yours British fingers like Vivian from the Young Ones anyway. But yeah, it was a fun little match, lots of back and forth. And then like it was definitely sort of the, juxtaposition of, wait a second. Oh, wait. Oh, no, we got hit low. Oh, we're going to actually sit there and take a second. And then that's when the crowd was chanting, you heard someone literally sit there and say, try and walk it off. When you get hit low, especially in the fake make-believe world of professional wrestling, sometimes fans' comments like that hurt. So fans, please think about it, what you have to say before you yell it in front of the crowd. And by the way, the person that yelled that definitely was not me. But no, definitely, I like the fact that, because Colt, fancied himself a professional wrestler, Nigel fancied himself an Englishman. And I felt together that they had some really good stuff. And then it sort of went the other way, especially after McGuinness hit that hard headbutt that basically busted Cabana open. And Prazak had a fantastic line. So much for British wrestling after, Nigel basically hit him low for the pin. I thought it was good, and I thought it advanced the story. And it's something where you want to see these guys actually have a fight, not over who's the better wrestler, but also because one of them's a limey prick.
Matt, I thought this match was like, we've seen them wrestle a few times where it's been pretty similar, where it's mostly just almost no like kind of strikes or moves. It's just kind of back and forth chain wrestling and some comedy. I felt this match was a bit different. Do you agree? And what did you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to be the high vote on this match. I just loved what they did here. Like, I just loved the storytelling of it. They very intentionally did something different, and I thought that the development of, the way the match went was just very creative. The first couple matches had a lot of comedy early on. Nigel kind of, Cabana kind of playing with Nigel, and Nigel would, be like, all right, smart Alec, and then he would, he'd do a little bit of comedy too, and he'd get annoyed, and the match would go the way it went. This time it starts out actually pretty serious. Just FYI, Gabe is on commentary now. Punk has left the booth to prepare for his main event. But, so Cabana's a little bit silly early. Like he says, hi, Nigel, when he escapes a front face lock. But they definitely do not lean into the comedy very much at all. They both seem, more, they're doing more basic American style, like with like arm bars and headlocks, not as many of the wackier looking European stuff, although there is a little bit of that. And Colt does some of his crawl outs, but he doesn't kind of preen as much after each one. It's funny because the gimmick the week before was that Nigel hit a low blow and like, was it intentional? Was it an accident? And Gabe is like, oh, it was definitely an accident. I'm sure about it. Which again, Gabe doing that thing where he pretty much telegraphs the finish. But as the match goes on, Cabana does do more of these crawl outs. And there is a comedy spot in the middle where Nigel has Colt in like a leg hold, and Cabana asks the ref, if a spot on the canvas is hard, and when the ref says yes, he slams Nigel's head into the spot. So it's funny. It's like as the match goes on, actually, Colt does a little bit more comedy, and Nigel actually, when he gets frustrated this time, he really shows the frustration and starts working more aggressively. He does his wrist lock takedown. When he works over the arm and the wrist. Probably setting up for that arm submission. But he does like a lot of like really aggressive wrist lock takeovers. Like as he gets more frustrated, his moves get more intense and hard hitting. And he does an arm clutch sleeper into a short arm clothesline like Rainmaker style. Kind of previewing his lariat heavy offense that was to come. He does a hammerlock head scissors sort of. Can't quite get it. But, he takes Colt down onto the mat in a hammerlock, and he puts his feet on the ropes, which absolutely outrages Gabe, and the crowd boos. Does another short arm clothesline, but Cabana ducks, so Nigel hits the rebound lariat for 2. So he's buffing up here. He's hitting more lariats. He's really turning into the Nigel that we remember from his main event era. At this point, where they're running the ropes, and Nigel body blocks Cabana, and Cabana drops down, and this time he accidentally low blows Nigel. And Cabana actually backs off and looks really concerned. Like he keeps going to Nigel in the ropes and Nigel keeps pushing him away and Cabana is keeping his distance. He's not bothering Nigel. He's being a sportsman. He's apologizing. But then Nigel takes his hand and headbutts him, and that's the spot that Keith was talking about. He busted him wide open. So that's when Nigel really, I think, kind of solidifies his heel turn. Cabana is bleeding, not a ton of color, but, it's there. And then they start slapping and striking each other in the face, and everyone's mad, and they're getting aggressive. Nigel grabs this really aggressive cravat. Cabana hits his angriest butt ever, and then a big lariat. He does a missile drop kick. So they're definitely going for bigger moves here. And they continue to push and shove. And then Nigel just goes off on Cabana. He's just like flailing at him. And then Nigel kicks him very low, deliberately, gets a cradle, gets the win. I just really like how this developed. Like, it's not like it was the best action match in ROH history. Certainly wasn't. But everything they did was good. And the storytelling really makes it stand out for me. I don't think there have been too many ROH rivalries where the storytelling has developed the way it did in this, and I think it was really effective here. And I was pretty impressed with how they ended up completing this heel turn.
I'm right there with you, Matt. This match probably people will appreciate more if they've been following the other matches.
Definitely,
I think the fun of this match is how it plays off the other ones, where the other matches, they've all been pretty similar and much less impactful moves and also more, even though there is still comedy in this match, like you said, more lighthearted in general. And in this match, even just that change late in the match where Colt finally kind of loses it, which I don't know if we've ever really seen up to this point in Ring of Honor, Colt get that pissed where, he's just pissed off that this guy's really revealed himself to be like a cheater and gone this low. And, I liked all of it. I liked how it started with the feet on the ropes and that headbutt spot where I guess you could, like you said, that really cements that, Nigel's turning heel where, they do that whole spot to show you to really contrast, look, this is what it looks like when a babyface accidentally kicks someone in the nuts. He actually gives the guy plenty of time and is really regretful and leaves himself open. And then Nigel taking advantage of that with a headbutt. And boy, that headbutt was hard. I think one thing we've learned revisiting early Nigels, he was always very willing to throw his head hard into other hard objects because, man, that looked pretty solid.
God bless him.
Yeah. There's also, if you want to see a real, I don't ever, this isn't oh, look at this, they screwed up. This isn't, because it's really hard to do this kind of stuff. But you ever want to see, a really obvious instance of a wrestler handing the blade to the ref? It was really obvious. I wasn't even looking for, I just saw, Colt, was down after that headbutt, and you could see the ref come right near him, and, Colt hand him the blade, and clearly the ref putting it in his pocket.
That was a Cinnaburst gum. It was very refreshing cinnamon gum. It was tasty. Better than that Big Red shit.
And
by the way, speaking of Big Red, this is a interlude, but I tweeted this once, but do you remember the Big Red jingle? That big red freshness lasts right through it.
Right through it. Yeah, so, your freshness goes on and on.
While you chew it.
Say goodbye a little longer. Make it last a little longer.
So the line that you left off on where they go, give your breath long-lasting freshness. I always found that line to just be a little bit too intense. You're singing about gum. This guy, he just gets real, give your breath long-lasting freshness. Wow. They just got so into giving your breath long-lasting freshness. And I was just relax, dude. You're singing about gum. Anyway.
I have a theory on that, though.
Yes.
Because if you know any sort of Big Red and any of these Wrigley gums, the flavor will last a good 10 minutes tops.
Yeah.
So I think the person singing it knew deep down in his heart, and down in their heart, that they were full of shit. That it actually is not long-lasting freshness.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, you sold me.
How do you ever want gum to taste? Though I mean, are people I want
25 minutes. I think it should be a good wrestling match. 25 minutes tops. Because after 30 minutes, you're just wow, there must be some really good stringent chemicals in this that will eat away at my teeth.
Yeah.
I'm a Trident gum guy now.
Yeah.
I realize, welcome to gum talk. But the Trident piece will last a good 20, 25 minutes with the flavor. So.
And good Japanese gum will last 45 minutes.
It's strong style.
Yeah.
He'll get 6 stars.
Japanese gum, it's lasting too long these days. It's getting over the top. I mean, God. But
well, the gum has a lot of like early flavor that doesn't play into the final flavor of the gum. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, especially when you get that strong style gum where you do that chew and you're thinking it's totally done with flavor, and all of a sudden they'll have that flavor fighting spirit.
Yeah.
The other thing I really liked about this, getting back away from the gum talk, I don't want to put a harsh the gum talk. Go back to it if you want. Big fan of it. I used to subscribe, much like Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes, to Chewing, the magazine for gum lovers. But anyway, spot I loved was, love might be strong, but I really enjoy. This was still very early on where Nigel was doing the rebound lariat, and you can, if you watch this match, Nigel does the rebound lariat, and you can actually hear. It's not many people, but a few people in the crowd, like when he's really leaning far back in the ropes, like almost do like a little of concern, like they think, like maybe they're not sure that they've seen this before, like he might be falling through the ropes and dying, and it's like, no, this is. It was like obviously like 6 months later, everyone would just see that and go, oh, he's doing the rebound lariat, that's cool. But there was actually, I feel like probably a few fans the first time they saw the rebound lariat, like, is this going wrong? Is he going to fucking fall through the ropes and break his neck? And I thought that was just, it was almost like an adorable reaction, just people being concerned, where I could say from the present, oh, silly past fans, you don't know.
Because Chicago cares.
Yes, definitely. And moving on to this.
Was that Lori Lightfoot's campaign slogan?
Yes. Yes. Oh, initially.
Yeah.
So, semi-main event time, Ring of Honor World Title match. Austin Aries defeats Bryan Danielson via pinfall in 24 minutes, 46 seconds after he hits the 450 splash. Matt, we've seen 3 of these now in Ring of Honor. We will see more of the pairing of Aries and Danielson. But if we were kind of saying this as a trilogy up to this point, between the final of the Survival of the Fittest and then their famous 73-minute match at Testing the Limit, what do you think about this match, and where do you think it kind of ranks in the 3?
So this was a good match. It was a very good match, but you've said that, you were disappointed by a few matches on this show. I really haven't been. Like, I've really enjoyed pretty much every match that was on the DVD so far. This match was a bit disappointing to me, only because, these guys have a history. These guys have had, 2 matches that I've liked a lot. The Survival of the Fittest match I thought was just phenomenal, and the Testing the Limit match, I just was really impressed with what they were going for. This match was a world title match, so they were certainly in a major position. They got a lot of time. They did good stuff, but it maybe didn't completely work as well as some of their other matches. They do go very slow at the beginning. That they're not going 70 minutes, but they go slow enough that you're like, okay, well, it could be. I think at one point, even I believe Gabe says this is going to go 60 minutes based on the pace that they're working, which is an interesting thing for a commentator to say, like to be like, just like, I think this match is going very slow. But it was always, everything they did was good. And Danielson is pretty dominant during the slow portion, and he's very aggressive. One of the most fun early spots was him going for the earthquake butt drop, and he even does the stomps, like where he just jumps around him in a semicircle and then does the earthquake butt drop for a 2 count. I feel like that move doesn't play as well when the guy is not 400 pounds. But, I'm sure it would still hurt. I don't want Danielson dropping his butt on me. Anyway, but Danielson does some of those the body slams, which in his previous matches with Aries he would do repeated body slams, and he runs Aries back first into the buckle. So I was like, maybe he's working his back. But then Aries turns the table by back suplexing Danielson to the outside and hitting the heat-seeking missile. And Gabe actually calls that the turning point of the match. And it very clearly is, and Aries takes over at that point, and he's kicking Danielson around ringside. He goes for an airplane spin, but Danielson fights it, so Aries turns it into a TKO-style move. But instead of dropping him in an ace crusher kind of thing, he drops him with his arm, so he starts going after Danielson's arm. And he does some arm trap body slams. He does the power drive elbow into the arm. And I love all that stuff when they micro target a body part and do fun stuff into it. He keeps trying to go for the cattle mutilation, but Danielson keeps rolling out of it and fighting back. And Then Danielson goes after Aries' arm. He does arm breakers across his shoulder, butterfly suplex, and Danielson yells, "You want to insult me?" and slaps him in the face. And I was like, when did Aries insult him? by doing wrestling moves at him? I don't remember the insult. Do you remember the insult? Because I didn't notice it.
I mean,
yeah.
There was no feud going after this. It was literally just the winner of the Homicide Danielson match on the last show gets a title shot. There was like no feud building this up.
Yeah, I agree. Danielson goes for an airplane spin, and Prazak, talking about the Homicide airplane spin, says, "I don't think we're ever going to see any human being rotate that many times ever again. I feel very safe in making that prediction." And I was just like, any human being? Any rotation? Very safe? Like, I feel like that's just a bold... I mean, I feel like there have been times before and since where a human being has rotated that many times. Like, I don't know, astronauts have probably done it, but... I mean,
aren't we all technically rotating on this big little blue pebble mat?
That's true. Constantly.
All life.
Yeah,
Maybe it was something where, let's just think about this. Maybe it was something when Bryan had Aries in the Calumniation. He's like, there's no way you're going to defeat Super Crazy in his hometown tomorrow. And also possibly they'll add Ricky Marvin and make it a three-way match for no reason whatsoever, probably because someone wasn't at the show.
That could be. I still just found it funny that Prazak just really went so far in. We're never going to see any human being, I quoted this, rotate ever that many times ever again. I feel very safe in making that prediction. I just find that to be so funny.
It's the very safe, like he's like one step away from being like, look, you can quote me on this, like, because look, I will put money on this. You want to take up some fucking betting lines, put up the odds. I'll do it.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, I guess I don't have it on record that someone's rotated that many times, but I feel very safe in saying that they have. But Danielson doesn't get the airplane spin because Aries goes for a sunset flip for 2, and then they do like the little roll-up sequence, and Aries does an O'Connor roll, and Danielson kicks out, sending Aries all the way to the floor. And then in one of my favorite spots of the match, Danielson jumps off the apron with a really hard European uppercut onto Aries. And I feel like that uppercut spot has been used in like highlight videos and stuff. It's just a really, really good jumping European uppercut. And Danielson, he does this spinning back kick to the side of Aries' head, and it looks really stiff. So Danielson is definitely laying it in. Aries fights out of the top rope, superplex. He goes for a 450. Danielson moves, and Aries hits a running corner drop kick instead, and follows up with another, gets a two count, and they're really picking up the pace here. And Danielson escapes a brainbuster and actually hits a regular, good old-fashioned atomic drop, which is not a move you see too often in ROH. Follows that up with a really nice top rope belly to back suplex. Crowd pops big for that one. He goes right into the cattle mutilation, and the crowd is definitely buying that it could be a finish. Aries almost gets the ropes, so Danielson turns it into that cattle mutilation pinning combo that he does sometimes, and the crowd is just heartbroken by the kick out. And they're all on their feet. Danielson does the airplane spin, and the crowd is actually counting the rotations correctly. Like, you know how sometimes when someone does a spinning move and the crowd like counts double? Like, I was following, and they really do count one per spin. And it ends up being like 31 spins. And Aries...
Chicago did it.
Say again?
Chicago knows how to count.
They do.
Can you say it one more time, please? Just for everyone in my town. I'm going to open up the windows.
Chicago knows how to count. Way to go. Actually, it's Chicago Ridge. If you go into the city, they're not as good.
Damn it.
So while he's spinning, Aries turns it into a crucifix bomb. And it's sort of like, some people I've heard say it was like a botched crucifix bomb, but I feel like it's just like, how good are you going to do it when you're in the middle of a spin? So I feel like it made sense for it to be kind of sloppy. And Aries doesn't sell the spin for very long. So he hits the brainbuster, hits the 450, gets the win. I thought it got really good near the end. Similar to early matches, they did spend a lot of time doing arm work, and it didn't really lead to much of anything. And I did feel the finish was kind of abrupt, so it wasn't as satisfying as I would have liked. I liked the body of the match better than, let's say, the Gibson match from the night before, but for whatever reason, I thought the Gibson match felt more epic and dramatic. So I think they kind of cancel each other out. This was a really, really good match. I just didn't think it hit the levels that maybe it could have. I don't know.
Keith, what do you think?
I think, though, like, you're comparing it to two fantastic matches that they had before, especially that Testing the Limit match, which is very different from this, where Aries is more of the confident champion here. I mean, Danielson's coming off of a steel cage match that didn't have the escape the cage rules attached with it. So I enjoyed it. I mean, I think at the time, I think it was cool because I think people were really up for Danielson winning the belt, and Aries made a very good, like, he wasn't the most crazy heelish champion, but he was heelish enough where you wanted to see someone like Joe take him out, someone like Bryan Danielson. Like, it definitely seemed like, thought of the guard changing back to the old regime, so to speak, and Bryan Danielson winning that title was a big part of it. But this was a dandy match, and the crowd was on their feet during that culmination, thinking that it was going to be the end. In the last few minutes, the crowd was completely up for it. And, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a very, very good match. But, I mean, it's sort of like comparing, I'm sure if I had a cheeseburger at a great restaurant that it would be pretty good, but comparing, like, they serve steak here, or they serve meat. I don't know why I'm doing a really bad Vince McMahon impersonation here, but it's something like that where the other options that they've had and they put on better matches. But I thought that this was a very, very solid match, and it definitely progressed the Bryan Danielson storyline. And it was just interesting to see him with that, like, comparing this to, like, when he main evented WrestleMania, not a few weeks ago, but the first time, where you see, like, both his beard and his personality shine through, where they were main event worthy. And here, right now, I guess he didn't deserve the title because of his minge beard.
Matt, I'm more on the Keith end. I thought this was a great match. So I think I liked it, but not probably like 4.25. I liked it probably a little bit more than you, but at the same time, I would say this is probably the least of their three matches that we've seen so far, I would say, because I think the first two matches, they each had something special going for it. The first match, the survival of the fittest end, where it's basically like a mini match that's part of that multi-man match, like, that really felt like Austin Aries' breakout performance. And so there was this excitement of him being kind of like the underdog, and you starting to realize in the middle of the match, like, wow, like this, we're seeing like someone becoming a star here. And then the Testing the Limit match, obviously, it's a hard match to completely recommend to people because it's well over an hour, but that also makes it memorable in a bunch of ways. There's all sorts of stuff that happens within that, and having the three falls to play with. And this match is it's a straight up wrestling match. They're now wrestling kind of as even. I feel like they're on the same level as opposed to maybe the first match and some of the second. And so there's not really like a big hook to this match in the way that the first two have these hooks. It's just a good wrestling match, or I would say still a great match, but it's not as memorable. It's not as special. Although there is still, like, I will not forget probably that Bryan Danielson did the fucking earthquake splash, like you said. Like, I love Bryan Danielson is a guy who he will work in stuff like airplane spin or an earthquake splash, but he won't like there's like a little wink to how ridiculous it is, but it's all in the context of serious matches. Like, he's never a guy when he does that stuff. It's not like, well, I'm doing a bunch of comedy now. It's like, no, I'm so good, I'm just going to throw this in, and you're going to accept it and enjoy it. And I love that about Danielson. That I want to really call out that spinning back kick he does to Aries' head. Like, I watched that in slow-mo after he really got Aries hard in the fucking head. Like, he's lucky he didn't hurt him. Maybe he did. Who knows? I mean, it is crazy to do a move that forceful, catches him right in the face. It just unbelievable. But yeah, this is just I agree with you, Matt. Like, they much like that earlier match on the show, they kind of do a bunch of limb work and kind of forget about it. And yeah, I do think to I agree with you that like the spot right near the end where Danielson's doing the airplane spin and then Aries turns it into the crucifix bomb, it does not look great. But I agree with you in the sense of how could you do that and have it look great and be safe? Where a guy's spinning you around and then you basically drop him on his head. Like, I don't know how you do that safe. It doesn't look great. I kind of wish it looked great, because if it did, I feel like if you just did crucifix bomb right into the 450, that would have been such a great ending. Instead, there's a couple spots kind of in between to get to that point. But the least of the three matches, but like what Keith said, like the least of their three matches is still great, in my opinion. I think it's still great. So after the match, Aries offers a handshake. Danielson blows him off. He just walks to the back. Aries celebrates until Samoa Joe's music hits, and out he comes to the ring, pure title in his hand. Joe gets on the mic and he says he's here for a few reasons. The first is to tell all the fans that Aries has done a hell of a job living up to the expectations of being Ring of Honor champ, but all he's done is live up to expectations that Joe himself has set already. Joe says now that he's the pure champ, it'll be the top belt in Ring of Honor. Aries grabs the mic from him and he says he doesn't know who Joe thinks he used to be, but what Joe used to be is what Aries is now, the top wrestler in Ring of Honor. Aries says he has respect for what Joe did with the belt, because if anyone else did what Joe is doing right now, trying to steal a spotlight, he'd slap the taste right out of their mouth. Aries says because he's an honorable champion, though, and because Joe is big, which gets a little chuckle from the crowd, he'll shake his hand and hold the ropes open for him. Aries offers a handshake. Joe accepts. We get a handshake. But then as Aries holds the ropes open for Joe to leave, he then times it so he can crotch Joe with the ropes, and then he attacks Joe. Joe selling injured ribs, for which is the reason why he wasn't wrestling on the show. He had a legit rib injury from Manhattan Mayhem. Aries goes for the 450, but as he's on the top turnbuckle, Joe recovers. He's up. He slaps Aries in the face, and he hits him with the muscle buster. Joe sells his ribs big again from the beating, and he grabs the mic to say, "You've been warned." Joe then just tosses Aries' world title at him, and he poses as Aries just sells being completely beat to shit. Joe goes to the back, and an army of refs and students then help Aries to the back. As they're doing so, Aries says the belt's still his. No one's going to take it from him. So I'll say, like, there's a bit of controversy about this. I kind of agree with. I don't think it makes Aries look great. And you could say, okay, Joe beat down Aries, but Aries had just wrestled a match. But then you could say, well, Joe was coming into this injured, and he's selling the injury during the beatdown. Even I think it's never a good look for a wrestler when you start a fight and then you do it like unfairly with a cheap shot, and then you're the one that ends up getting your ass handed to you. Like you know, maybe if you're being like, this would work if Aries was a like cowardly heel character, but no, he's not. He's a heel, but he's a very, like, his gimmick's almost the opposite, where he's like the fighting champ who defends against the top opponents, and he's winning clean, and he's not using interference. And so for him to do like this cheap shot, and then within seconds he's getting beat down, and Joe like lording over him and being like, you know, basically telling him he got served. Like, I felt that made Aries look a bit like a bitch. I know it's setting up to a future match, but by the way, that's a match Aries will lose. So even there, you know, it's kind of reversing some of the good stuff that's happened for Aries with beating Joe a couple times. But what do you guys think about, like, did you have the same impression or a different impression? Matt, did you have any thoughts?
Well, so I sort of felt like it didn't really lead to much of anything. Like, I thought it was entertaining as a segment, but, you know, even though they do have a match, it sort of feels like it's out of context from this, because it's after Aries turns face, kind of. Because Aries does pretty much turn face right after he loses the belt. I mean, there's never a real, like, strong face turn moment, but he pretty much does. And so that's another reason why I think it's a little bit weird. Like, Aries turns, like, he's kind of acts like, he kind of acts like a stoogey heel here, and then he's basically a babyface in, like, moments later. So that's the other thing. So I don't know. I didn't think it was super productive, but I guess they just wanted to get Joe on the show. That's sort of how I felt.
Joe, for those who did not listen to our last episode, again, Joe was able to work the previous show, the four-way, which he did very little in, but he still could work it. and from the injury where he got hurt, I believe, in the Manhattan Mayhem main event where Low-Ki did the double stomp to him. It legit hurt his ribs. But Joe, for whatever reason, on this night, he couldn't even do that. I don't know what his original plan, what the original match was for him, or any plan for him on the show. So this was like the only bit you got from Joe, which I have to imagine is another reason why he got to do a beatdown, which was, let's give them a little bit of Joe action, the fans, so they don't feel like they've completely missed out on Joe. But the PW Torch wrote about Joe's injury. They wrote, regarding Samoa Joe's attending this weekend's Midwest swing, even though he was in no condition to perform, Sapolsky tells the Torch, simply put, Joe is the man. He is very old school in his mentality where he'll fight through the pain and always strive to give the fans their money's worth. There's no doubt Joe is a leader in our locker room. Joe signed autographs at the merchandise table before the event in Chicago Ridge, Illinois. So Joe still putting himself out there, but not being able to work. And then we go to intermission. And as the cage is being set up, we get the weird intermissions that you get when these happen, where the intermission comes right before the main event. But Dave Prazak is backstage, joined by James Gibson. Prazak says beating one half of the tag team champions tonight could put Gibson in line for a tag title shot with a partner. Gibson says he's out for gold. It doesn't matter if it's the world, tag, or pure title. Gibson assumes Spanky would be down to be his partner, so he's officially challenging Whitmer and Jacobs to a tag title match with Spanky. Chad Collier interrupts, saying he beat Jimmy Jacobs clean tonight, so if anyone deserves a tag title shot, it's him and his best friend, Nigel McGuinness. In fact, he says, forget the tag title shot. Just give me the belt right now. Just give us the belt. Chad keeps asking for someone to hand them over. Dave Prazak does a great little "Are you crazy?" side eye in the background during this. Gibson then gets in Chad's face and says the two of them go way back, but do not get in his way.
I like that Gibson's like, I'll never speak for another man, and then he proceeds to be like, but Spanky will definitely be my tag team partner. I would say he will definitely want to join me. Like, I thought that was funny.
Especially when their whole storyline so far has been like they've been kind of squabbling and back and forth. And now he's just like, yeah, he'll work with me. He's my pal.
No wonder Spanky turns on him in that match.
We cut to Alex Shelley backstage. He says Generation X, something he's created, has caused him so much anguish. They broke his arm, but it's a good thing he's ambidextrous. He says the war between them has escalated and needs to come to a close. So we're building towards something. Happens in a few shows. Elsewhere, Bryan Danielson, still in his trunks, is about to leave the building when a frantic Dave Prazak catches him, wanting to know why he didn't shake Austin Aries' hand tonight. Danielson says after not winning the Ring of Honor World title tonight, everything he's done means nothing. He quits. Then, and what I found to be, Matt, an unintentionally hilarious shot, we see Danielson walk away as we hear his little wheelie suitcase drag on the asphalt next to him. And by the way, he's not in plain clothes. He's just in his black trunks, and he's just like walking out.
Yeah, he's just walking out naked, basically.
And I just thought it was like undercut, like the serious moment. It was just, I don't think you can have a serious moment that is then immediately followed by guy in his underwear walks away with his wheelie suitcase. Like,
well, that's what he did after the Roman Reigns match.
So this was writing Bryan Danielson out for legit, because we'll go to the Observer. Dave Meltzer would write at the time, the biggest news of the weekend concerned Bryan Danielson, who is leaving the promotion. Similar to Samoa Joe, he's hit a major depression point regarding the business. It's the deal of working his ass off, getting great, and seemingly not mattering as WWE and TNA had shown no interest in him, although there is at least some interest in him now. And New Japan hasn't brought him back in nearly a year. He said he was tired of working U.S. Indies where it's based on high spots and building to lots of false finishes, and is leaving for Europe to work there all summer long and make a decision from there. So, yeah, for people that weren't around during this time or don't remember, there was a time where, I think this was during the time where Bryan Danielson for a second was like going, well, maybe I should join the Peace Corps or something. Like, he was legit feeling like, you know, kind of talking about like, I'm not sure if there's a place for me in pro wrestling, you know, kind of similar to what we talked about with like, or how Dave even just mentioned, similar to Samoa Joe on recent shows we talked about. He kind of went through a crisis like this, and Danielson was going more serious because, you know, with Joe, it was just, you know, he kind of had a couple live journals where he was like, oh man, this sucks. But he was then almost immediately was like, you know, don't worry, I'm going to keep going. Where Danielson, for a second there, I was more scared that like Danielson was just going to retire. You know, it was like, I'm leaving to Europe and then maybe I just won't come back. So it would have been weird, Matt, to think if this was like the end of Bryan Danielson in Ring of Honor forever. This
week in wrestling would be pretty different.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of wild to think that this literally could have been like writing him out forever. But luckily it wasn't. When he would come back, we will not see him for a long time in through the year's time, but he will come back, and then we will get a bounty of Bryan Danielson. But finally, we get a little recap video for the Punk Rave feud, just like the Homicide Danielson cage match got the night before. And that brings us to the main event, the steel cage match. CM Punk defeated Jimmy Rave with Jade Chung and Prince Nana in 24 minutes, 16 seconds. I thought this was another great match. I thought this was probably my favorite match on the show. CM Punk's one of those guys, when you watch him from this era, you could tell he's a guy who had like one foot in the old school and one foot in the new school, because when he would wrestle a guy like AJ Styles, he was very much, even though I don't think that was Punk at his best, he would try and do like the work rate modern indie kind of match and that pace. But then sometimes in like tag matches or stuff like this, you would really see how much he loved like probably the wrestling he grew up with, like 80s more old school wrestling, because there's a lot of, I think, modern cage matches the last 20 years where guys just kind of go back and forth. They try and think of really innovative spots. They just try and it's almost like really innovative match that just happens to be in a cage and maybe utilize it for a few spots. And this is a match where it felt like a really old school cage match. Like when it starts, Punk is, you would almost expect, he's going to run at Rave to get his hands on him. But instead, he's just so calm and relaxed. But it makes sense because you feel like Punk's acting like he's already won. Like just getting Rave alone in the cage, he knows Rave is screwed. Like this is the thing he's won for it. Finally, in this whole feud where Rave's always been having interference helping him and outside weapons and all sorts of stuff, like he's trapped in this cage. He can't get out. Punk can almost like play with him like a cat with a mouse. Like he's going to take his time. And for like the first third of the match, he just dominates. Like Rave gets almost no offense, and Punk's throwing him into all the cage over and over. At one point he teases like he's just going to leave the cage and win. And he's getting a chair handed to him, beats Rave with the chair. And it's one of those matches where all the changes of momentum, they all make logical sense. Because at one point when Punk goes to leave, Nana throws powder in his eyes. At that point, Rave finally gets control. It makes sense. Rave can only get control when someone puts the odds in his favor. And Rave also then lays Punk out with a chair shot, which is harkening back to the Manhattan Mayhem match. And then we get moments in this match where there's shoelace is used, which is harkening back to their first big Ring of Honor match where, he choked Punk out with the shoelace. And then from there, again, both guys bleed. Punk with his usual great blade job. We get lots of, cage spots. And then it does build to more like just some bigger spots in the end of the match. And then another thing that I think this match really works well at is, we talked about on the previous show where Homicide and Danielson, where Danielson does the flying headbutt off the top of the cage, and Homicide's back on offense like less than a minute later, and it's not the finish. It's not even like the second last spot in the match. And we were both like, that's kind of crazy. And this match does not commit that sin. The final spot in this match we can get to in a couple of minutes about the backstory to it is Jimmy Rave taking a superplex off the top of the cage, and it's an amazing holy shit spot. And to their credit, that's the end of the match. Punk wins with a superplex off the cage, and he wins by pinfall. Although, unlike the previous night, this was also a match with cage escape rules. And normally, I would complain about, the previous night they didn't have cage escape rules. They made a big point of saying, it was only pinfall or submission. It was pin, submission, or cage escape. But I do think it benefited the match because it worked well, because cage escape, some people hate cage escape matches. Some people like them a lot. I feel they work for certain wrestlers in certain kinds of matches. I feel like it works in this kind of match where Rave is the chicken. So he didn't want to be in the cage match to begin with. In fact, before the match starts, you can hear like Rave talking to Nana being like, I don't know if I want to do this. And so, of course, it makes sense. Like, every time Rave is in control, and there's moments in the match where he tries to escape the cage, because it makes sense. He's a coward. He can't beat Punk a straight-up match. He just wants to run away. And there are multiple moments in this match where Punk could have escaped the cage, but he kind of shows you, I don't want to escape the cage just yet, because I hate this guy, and I'm having fun, like, just ruining him and destroying him. And so I think the cage escape worked for them, although ironically, this match then does not end with a cage escape spot. It ends with a pin. But I feel like this was a great kind of old school cage match and a great way to blow off the feud. And it was almost kind of, Matt gave me a bit of a reminder of like the Nigel Colt match, where part of the fun is, just like how part of the fun of the Nigel Colt match is, you've seen these guys work one style, and now it's finally getting paid off where they're changing things up, and now there's a heel turn that's been built to. I felt like part of the fun in this match is like so much of it is just Punk destroying Rave, where you like, if you just watch this match on its own, you might go, well, I'd like to see a match that was a bit more back and forth. But I feel like part of the fun of this is if you watch the whole feud, it's like Punk finally, after the whole feud, Punk finally gets a time where no one can help Rave, although there is actually interference in this match. Jay Chung runs in through the door. Nana runs in through the door. There's powder in his eye. But still, a lot of this match is about Rave is finally in a position where he can just be helpless, and Punk is just gleefully getting his revenge. And but what did you think, Matt?
I think one thing that you left out about the cage escape thing was it gives, like, the main purpose it served in the match was to give an excuse for the interference in a good way. Because, in cage matches, the whole thing is supposed to be that it keeps out all the outside interference. And there were a couple of interference spots in this match, and you could say, somebody could find that pretty annoying. But the way they worked it in was pretty clever. Nana was able to throw powder in Punk's eyes because he was about to leave the cage, right? The cage door was open at different points for Jade Chung and Nana to run in because of the escape the cage rules. So I think it actually did a lot for the match, even though it didn't play into the finish. And of course, the way they explained it was that Nana used his high-priced lawyers to get the escape the cage rules put into the contract. So I think they were really smart about how they worked in those to escape the cage rules. Do you agree with that aspect of it?
Yeah, definitely. Even even the cage escape, it just makes certain spots like the end, the superplex, more organic. Because I think one of the things we talked about with the Homicide Danielson match was like, I think they get to the Danielson off the top of the cage spot, or some spot where there's a spot in that match where we talked about where like Homicide's climbing the cage to like facilitate a spot, but I was thinking, like, I remember mentioning it to you, like, why is he climbing the cage in a non-cage escape match where Gabe's on commentary saying neither guy wanted to have cage escape, but it's because they needed to do a certain spot up high, where this match, if it's cage escape, you can get to a spot off the top of the cage really easily because it's easy. Just a heel tries to escape, face catches him, you do a spot off the cage. It makes sense.
Right, exactly. And, I also, one other thing it did was it gave them a chance to do some homages to the Hart versus Hart SummerSlam 94 match, where they're like both diving for the door, and then like one of them jumps over the other guy to dive to the door, and they're pulling each other back. So that was fun. But no, I agree with you. I thought this was the best match of the whole weekend. In terms of everything coming together, I thought the atmosphere is actually one of the best parts. From Rave's entrance and the crowd's going nuts, and then they do a really neat thing for Punk's entrance where they use one camera shot from the side, like the hard camera, showing Punk's entrance the entire way, which is just, they produce the match differently. And I think that adds an epic feel. The other thing that I noticed is that they use 3 cameras in the edit of this match. Normally they use 2 cameras. And the third camera, usually the one that's being shot by Shane Hagedorn during this era, is not used at all. Except, I think Joe versus Kobashi did it. And I think in this match they did it. So you get some really different kinds of camera angles in this match. And I think that adds a level of just, excitement and just importance and cinematic nature to the match that you don't normally get in big ROH matches. And I thought everything kind of came together. This was like Bruno Sammartino conquering a final match in a cage in Madison Square Garden, with Punk in the Bruno role. The crowd was this was definitely, so this match I would say was the peak of CM Punk as a babyface in ROH. Whether, just in terms of him being the conquering hero in his hometown. By the time he comes back for the next show, it's his farewell show, and then that's his last ROH match in Chicago. And he only, I think, has 3 more matches in ROH as a babyface at all. In the third one, he turns heel in that one. So I feel like this is really like the peak of that version of CM Punk in ROH. And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I completely agree. Like, I'm glad you said. I really do think this is like the most over we've ever seen CM Punk, and certainly the most over just as like a pure baby. Like, I know it's his hometown, but he really came off like just a giant star on this show and in this match.
And I think they did a lot of work to get it to that point. Besides it being his hometown, the camera work, the production, and they really built this angle really well. If you think about it, the Rave versus Punk storyline did not last very long.
No.
Right? It went from the first anniversary, the first of the 3 anniversary shows to this. Started early February or mid-February, and it lasted until mid-May. 3 months. And really, 3 matches, right? 3, or at least 3 singles matches, right? Because the one at Stalemate didn't end up being a match, right? It ended up being him, Punk versus Mike Cruel. But it was perfect. It was, just they didn't need any more than that. And the way it built to this, it didn't feel bloated. They just did what they needed to do, and it got to this point. And they had this really cool old school match. Rave was absolutely over as a heel. The psychology was perfect. Punk absolutely beat his ass, was totally dominated him, was by far the better man. Rave needed Nana to throw the powder in the eyes so that Rave could take over. And, they both guys do blade jobs. Luckily this blade job was not as bad as the one from Manhattan, though it was still, a good blade job.
You can clearly see Punk like jab himself in the forehead twice, like really violently. And I was thinking, I guess that's why Punk's blade jobs are so good. Because I was kind of shocked at how fast his hand went to his head. But I guess that's how you do a blade job. You just got to get quick. But he did it like twice, like real scary. It did.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary. You can see it. Like,
yeah, he was good at it, I guess.
Yeah, he was great at it.
Yeah. Rave did a couple blade jobs, but I think the first one dried up. It feels like he probably cut himself more than once.
Yeah.
But they have the interference. They have like the classic spots, throwing him into the cage. Rave trying to escape, them falling off the top rope, and then at one point they're punching each other in the middle of the ring. And Gabe says, "This is what ROH is all about: toe-to-toe fisticuffs." And I was like, I don't think that's what they said ROH was supposed to be about. Toe-to-toe fisticuffs. I don't think that was what I thought it was supposed to be about pure wrestling, but it was fine. I don't mind. And but yeah, I have to say that the interference. Normally I'd be annoyed by it, but it worked. I still don't love that it ended up being, somebody doing a move on a woman. Like that's it's sort of thing you accept in ROH, and or at least have to live with. And the way they did it wasn't so bad, right? Chunk jumped on Punk's back. Punk kind of like slammed her off. Punk signaled that he was going to hit her, but fortunately he didn't do that. But Rave charged and kind of Punk moved out of the way, so Rave speared Chung. At this point it's like we said, we're numb to it, unfortunately. At least they don't do it on every show now. But there was a point where Nana picked up Chung and carried her out of the ring and then just dropped her on the floor. And Prazak goes, "No respect for women at all." And it was like, so you're talking about, is that like ROH's slogan now? You're finally being honest about what you're doing. Ring of Honor, no respect for women at all.
I would not buy that T-shirt, but I would laugh at a T-shirt that had the Ring of Honor logo and then just said no respect for women.
Yeah, I was gonna say if we could have like a pro wrestling tees store. I wouldn't sell that shirt, but
no, exactly.
But it would be funny to think of.
Yeah.
I do have respect for women, and that's why I think this is bad for them to do that. But
Happy Mother's Day, every woman listening. If you're a mother, or if you're not a mother, I still have Happy Mother's Day.
Listen, you're putting your foot in your mouth here, and I think you need to take it out. Anyway, I really liked, I also really liked, Rave does that running knee strike, and I really liked that there was a spot where Rave went for the Rave Clash off the top rope and Punk fought out, so Rave hit the knee strike off the top rope. I thought that was a really cool spot. It's such a thigh slappy move, but I don't mind it at all. Like, I'm not the kind of guy that minds thigh slapping kicks. I actually enjoy the sound that they make, so I like that a lot. And I thought the finish was great. It wasn't anything that was too crazy, but it was so crazy. You know what I mean? Like, it's a vertical suplex, but the craziest vertical suplex that you've ever seen. and it ended the match. So I just felt like this was as close to perfect as they could have done. Just really felt like a main event. I do think the Jade Chung stuff, marred it a little bit, but in the context of 2005, just great. Great atmosphere, such a good atmosphere. One of the best atmospheres of an ROH match that I could think of so far. So I'm very high on this match.
So I have a little more to say, but we've prattled on a lot. So Keith, what did you think?
I thought it was good. I thought it was a fine cage match. The cage I would give on a scale of 1 to 10. I'd sit there and say this cage is a solid 5. It's something where you knew that people wouldn't be climbing up the sides of it. And it was great, especially during the superplex spot where you could see the refs sort of holding on for dear life on the cage. So that was always a good time. I enjoyed the fact that it actually was the escape the cage rule. Sometimes those things are lame, but I think Ring of Honor had the fine history with it, especially with the Austin Aries Cabana match where Austin basically toped his way into victory by coming out the cage. So they at least had that going in. I enjoyed Dave saying the fact that the taxpayers' money from Ghana for the high-priced lawyers to make sure the escape rule was in effect was pure Gabe gold. God bless him. And, the match was good. It definitely felt like a nice conclusion to this feud. I still feel that Jimmy Rave is just Jimmy Rave, and that's it. But, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good way to wrap up this feud, especially with all the twists and turns that we've seen. There were some nice throwbacks to the other matches that they've had in this feud. Sadly, no bug spray, though. It would have been nice to see a return of the bug spray and blindness and sort of that stuff. But I thought it was a nice little ending, and the crowd definitely, this was the match that drew the crowd because CM Punk was Chicago's favorite homeboy that wasn't Chili Willy from ECW. So it was real good.
So yeah, the one I said I wanted to say something else. The one I want to say there's a bit of backstory to the superplex off the top of the cage that ends the match. This is something that Jimmy Rave has talked about both in his RF Video Shoot interview and the great episode we often reference when talking about this era of Jimmy Rave. That episode of An Honorable Mention where they interviewed Jimmy Rave. He's talked about where he didn't know that this was going to be the finish. I guess like the day of the show, Punk texted him back when they were texting every day, and Punk says, I've got an idea. I know what the finish of the match is going to be, and it's going to be superplex off the top. And Jimmy says that he wrote back to Punk, LOL, like you're not serious. And Punk is like, no, I'm serious. The finish should be a superplex off the top. And Rave said that he had kind of thought about the Pepsi plunge off the top, but I guess everyone realizes that wouldn't have been a good because that would have required Punk taking like a knees first bump off the top of the cage. But so Rave was not like, understandably nervous about taking a superplex off the top of the cage. So he was like saying, like, could we practice this or something or like work this out? And so they actually set up the cage before the show and then took it down before the show started to do this, except then Punk, even though said he would show up before the show so they could work it out, doesn't show up. And then he shows up like after bell time and it's too late to go over it. And Punk just says to him, it's probably better that we didn't practice it anyway. And Rave was worried, but like luckily they do the spot. And there is a moment where they're at the top where Rave does slip in his footing like a little bit. And Rave was talking about being scared, like, my back's to the crowd. So if I fall off the cage, I'm dead. I can't really break my fall, but it works. And I was thinking, Matt, watching that, like, it's so funny how in wrestling, like, there are so many stories like that where things are kind of actually, they didn't do enough due diligence and things are kind of dangerous, but it turns out just to be a great story because it works out well. Like, isn't that cool that it worked out anyway? But if that story, like if Rave slips and breaks his neck, that's an episode of Dark Side of the Ring. Like that same story of like Punk said he'd, work it out and he never showed up and, Rave wasn't comfortable. Like that would be ominous, but instead, because it works out great, it's just like, isn't that like a crazy wrestling story,
I mean, it's amazing, how lucky in terms of like how few of those stories are where these big stunts go so wrong that it becomes tragic. There are obviously a few very notable examples, but there aren't so many. And, I think just chalk that up to luck.
especially when this is a show where the ring was already broken. I don't know how. And, a lot of times that Ring of Honor cage looked like it was held together by like string and a prayer. And, I wouldn't have felt comfortable even in the best of times probably doing that spot off the top of a cage. But like a Ring of Honor cage, which often you could see like the walls would be kind of crooked and kind of just taped together and stuff, like the idea of I'm going to stand on top of this and you're going to balance on top with me, and we're going to do a spot off of it. This isn't like the scramble cage where you at least have those platforms where you have like real good footing.
Yeah, I mean, and hey, luckily for ROH, compared to some other indie cages I've seen, it's like cream of the crop. So like, it's so probably, as for every crazy ROH example, there's like 10 other crazy indie examples that you can't believe actually what turned out okay,
Yeah. So, that should be our show, Matt. Instead of the dark side of the ring, it should be about like things in wrestling that didn't go badly, but they could have. Like that would be never ending, that series. Exactly. We'd have way more seasons where it's like this could have been a bad thing, but it barely worked out. Like you could do a whole episode about that delirious back suplex he took on the show. Like
listen and learn, top 1,000.
But so yeah, that's the match. After the match, the refs literally drag Rave out of the cage, which is one of those things where you're like, obviously it's perfectly fine because, he's not really hurt. But you were thinking like, if they were trying to sell this like what refs would legit do, just dragging a guy out of the cage by like his arms and stuff, like, not how you would treat a potentially like seriously injured person. Ace Steel and Colt Cabana join Punk in the ring. Punk and Colt share a big hug, which made me feel aw, because they're probably not sharing hugs anymore. Punk poses on top of the cage as the crowd chants for him. Punk and the crowd sing along to his theme. And again, Punk just comes off as a gigantic star on this night. The crowd starts chanting, "Thank you," and then ROH. Punk leans into the camera and says, "I'm coming to get you, Austin Aries." And then he starts screaming at ringside, saying he's coming for the gold. So they're starting to build, towards that. It's only a few shows away now. And yeah, no after show promos for this show. Really just a great ending where Punk comes off as a megastar. So, Matt, what did you think about the show as a whole? Because I have a feeling you're going to feel similar to me.
Well, you had some matches that you were pretty disappointed by early, but like, the only thing that I was even slightly disappointed by was the title match, and I still thought that was like a really, really good match. So to me, this is one of the best ROH shows, top to bottom in terms of in the ring. Like there were no major storyline developments or anything like that, or title changes, but just top to bottom matches. You can't really get too many that are better. And a great crowd, a really epic seeming main event. This is elite tier ROH show, at least for this time. I almost feel bad for the final showdown because that was a very good show, but compared to the other two May shows, it's not nearly as memorable. And this was, this and Manhattan Mayhem in the same month, and then you add in the final showdown. It's like May 2005. Those are the only 3 shows that month. That's the best month in ROH history in terms of if you're going to pick a month to just get all the DVDs from, you can't go wrong with May 2005. Damn. Like what a really, really good month for ROH, and this was just a hell of an entertaining show. Again, not a super eventful show, although it does end a really major feud, but just super good matches. Like, just really, really good.
Even though I did not like some of the early matches as much as you, I did not think anything was even average. And I think like if the worst match on the show would be say like Chad Collier, Jimmy Jacobs, that's a pretty good show probably if that's your worst match. Because even that I would say was enjoyable, better than average, like a good little match. And I would say this is, one of the best Ring of Honor shows we've seen so far because you've got 3 great matches. I would say basically everything in the second half of the show hit really big for me. Nothing is bad. Nothing's even average. And I could I think Manhattan Mayhem has a special atmosphere the show doesn't have, and
like a pacing and like a storyline thread that makes this probably a little bit better, but still.
But yeah, exactly. So that's probably the better show. But I could see some people liking this show better just because it does have like 2 or 3, I would say 3, like really like legit great matches, and you have like a big end of a feud, cage match to blow this off where, the Manhattan Mayhem doesn't really have that fine finality to it. But just great, a great show. And like you said, like two of the best shows Ring of Honor has done in the same month in a 3-show span. Just, they were really hitting here. And I also just liked, you said it wasn't the most eventful show. In a way, I agree. But what I do like about the show is I felt like it was one of those shows where there was all sorts of different things at different stages on the show. Like on the top, you got the end of a big feud that had been happening for a few months. You had Danielson leaving for a few months, but then you had like a big middle chapter of a feud with the Nigel turn. And then early on the show, you had stuff that like kind of didn't have any storyline at all, but it was, trying to start building some contenders for the tag titles. You had the kind of a, not really important, but a middle match of the Alex Shelley Generation Next feud. So it was kind of like there was some stuff starting, there was some stuff ending, and there was stuff kind of just floating in the middle. And I like wrestling shows that are a mix of that. Like I like the wrestling shows where everything gets blown off, but I also like the wrestling shows where you kind of like there's all different stages of feuds happening on the same card. Keith, what did you think about the whole show?
Whole show I thought was a very, very solid show. Was there anything on the show that was like, my God, this is the greatest ROH show or blow-away show of all time? No, but it was an incredibly solid show from top to bottom. It really makes me appreciate Combat Wrestling today and the influence that Ring of Honor had on it in so many ways in terms of work style as opposed to production and presentation. Like I think, as much as just considering this, I'm someone apparently that's in the biz, and I'm doing the air quotes right now because you can't see me. Ring of Honor was something where, as much as I was a big ECW fan, traveled to Philadelphia multiple times, huge All Japan fan, and pro wrestling, like a lot of press promotions. To me, Ring of Honor was one of the most inspiring things that made me really excited about pro wrestling, and that's why I'm glad that we have this podcast, that we can share our memories and our reflections of watching this stuff so much later. And Lord, help my soul, please, Ring of Honor, please just get a streaming service with all these shows on there. Don't edit stuff out, just pay a little bit more of that fat Sinclair cash just to get all these shows available for everybody, because that'd be great.
And so, yeah, that's the episode for this time. And Keith, I want to thank you for doing the show. Obviously, everyone check out AAW. If you want to contact us at Through the Years, that's ThROH@gmail.com, throughtheyears@gmail.com. That is our email address. At Trevor Dame on Twitter is me. At Mayor MGF on Twitter is Matt. We have a thread on the Pro Wrestling Only Forum Plugs Forum. And next time on the show, we will be covering New Frontiers, which is, I guess you would say, a Ring of Honor B show, but it has James Gibson versus Samoa Joe and Spanky versus Austin Aries. And I also think the last time Colt Cabana and CM Punk ever teamed together in Ring of Honor. So it's a fairly eventful show. Plus, like Homicide versus Kevin Steen, which probably didn't seem like a big match at the time, but, knowing them now seems like a big match. We'll see how well that turns out. So a bunch of interesting stuff on that show. And I'm excited to do that, Matt. You'll just be you and me, Matt, cozy together. You and me, as usual. Until next time, have a good time. Have a great time.